All right. We should start by pointing out we have done another members special. Because I'm an idiot and I like getting my feelings hurt, I decided I would roll the dice and see what John and Marco thought about John's of Bleecker Street, which is my beloved preferred pizza institution in Manhattan. And so what we did was we spent a truly absurd amount of money to get Goldbelly to send us 2 not particularly large pizzas per family. And do that overnight from Manhattan to our respective households. And then we cooked them up, much like we did with the, I almost said frozen meals, but don't call them frozen meals, call them TV dinners. And so they all arrived at our desks at about the same moment. We talked about it on air. I will not tell you if my feelings were hurt or not, but I will tell you that it was an adventure to say the least. And so if you are not a member, you can go to atp.fm/join. You can join for as little as 1 month, although we'd love for you to stick around. If you join, you get access to all the member stuff that's ever happened. And we're up to 6-ish episodes, I think, something like that now.
Yeah,
and so you get access to all that. You could grab them all and then cancel your membership. We're not slimy. We let you do that. You'll hurt our hearts and our feelings, but you can do that. That is allowed. And so, but I think once you check out all the perks, you will love it. So please check out atp.fm/join. Marco, John, anything to add?
If you could imagine what it would be like for Casey to try to convince 2 New Yorkers with strong opinions on pizza to try his pizza, you can see why this was a good episode. I suggest if you've been on the fence before about membership for whatever reason, you aren't a member yet, but you like when we argue about non-technical things, or even just discuss.
There was plenty of that.
Yeah, even just discuss non-technical things. These kind of member specials, and this one in particular, it's a good venue for that.
Indeed. Come for the pizza talk, stay for the bagel talk. And also, I would like to point out just one more time, I probably made this point on the special, although I might have forgotten. My birth certificate says state of New York, my friend. Only 2/3 of your hosts, their birth certificate stayed in New York, and Marco is not one of them. I'm just going to put that out there.
Yeah, but which one
John,
of us lives here? Oh,
yeah, that's fair.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, so we're all imposters one way or another.
When's the last time you lived there? You lived in New York, Casey?
Lived in New York, late 80s,
right?
I think.
John?
Yeah, something like that.
I go there every year, at least. I'm like Casey. Did your parents live in New York when you were born, or did they just drive there to give birth to you?
Is that a thing that people do?
I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to be offended. And to be honest, I started it by throwing you under the bus earlier, but I'm not sure how offended I should be. No, they were living, I believe they were living in Fort Montgomery at the time, which is nearish Newburgh. And I was born in Newburgh, which is I'm now probably giving away some sort of top secret state
you're not supposed
thing.
to tell people the answers to your security
questions.
questions.
Yes, there you go. Whoopsies. But no,
That's
they
right.
lived in New York.
There's nothing in Newburgh for any security question to ask about.
I didn't know where any of those places were, so I assumed they're all upstate, so never mind.
Yeah, it's upstate.
Well, they're not upstate by most standards, but by both
Newburgh,
of your standards.
hold on. Newburgh is definitely upstate.
Oh, come on. It's not that far.
Marco lived in Brooklyn long enough to adopt the Long Island definition of upstate.
It's like a 2-hour drive north.
No, it is. Is it really? Then
Yes.
maybe. No way. A 2-hour drive from
Everything
Fire
is
Island?
a 2-hour drive when you go upstate.
Yeah, well, we established that frickin' Manhattan is 2 hours from Fire
That's what
Island.
I'm saying.
So,
Yeah, no.
No, that doesn't. No, so how about this? John's of Bleecker. Let's just take that as a landmark. Let's see how far we are from Newburgh. Give me a second.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Is this as the helicopter flies, or if you actually have to take roads?
No. I'm doing this on Google Maps. It's under an hour and a half, 70 miles.
Mm-hmm. Wait, hold on. At what time of day?
Exactly.
Right now.
At 8 p.m.?
Oh, so 8 o'clock at night, right?
Yeah,
okay,
right.
On a Monday.
Yeah, try it anytime while the sun's up.
I don't know, man. So you consider like the lake that we used to go to, you consider that like deeply upstate, I assume?
I wouldn't use the word deeply, but it's unquestionably upstate.
I guess to me, I'm not trying to say I'm right. I am not trying to say I'm right. But to me, I feel like anything within a couple of hours of the city is barely upstate.
No.
So where's the dividing line? Harlem? I mean,
Philadelphia is within a couple hours of the city. Like, I mean, this makes no sense.
Okay. No. Okay, that's fair. So where's the dividing line? Is it 125th Street, for Christ's sakes?
No.
I mean, it depends on the definition, but and different people have different definitions. The one definition every New Yorker can agree upon is upstate begins north of them. no one thinks they live upstate.
Fair.
However,
Right.
if you kind of plot like the bell curve of like, all right, well, where does upstate really begin to most people's opinions? It certainly begins at least above like Westchester or Rockland counties, and possibly even lower than that depending on who you ask.
So you would, this is going to sound argumentative. I really don't mean it that way. So you would say Westchester County you personally, Marco, would say is or is not upstate?
I personally would say no, but it's not the city. Like I would never say it's the city. It's definitely not. And it's not quite upstate, but it's certainly like a boundary. Upstate. It's kind of like the way the atmosphere of the Earth transitions to space. It's not like a clear line.
I think that's reasonable, actually. That's where I'm fuzzy because I don't get it.
When I was a kid growing up on Long Island, if we visited where Marco's house is in Westchester, I would say that Marco lives upstate.
Literally everything is upstate. Like I know.
I'm just telling you what the and I recognize that that's a very limited perspective, like that classic New Yorker cover that shows the map of the United States with the New Yorker's view of it, and doesn't make sense. Yeah. And today, I would probably say anything that's above Westchester, but I still feel in my bones the idea of like going to visit Marco would mean driving upstate,
and certainly like by the time you get like. Once you're more than 20 or 30 miles from the city, I think the argument is, you're pretty much upstate.
So 20 or 30 miles. You said miles or minutes?
It's just a ballpark, but I'm going to say, like something on the order of like 20 or 30 miles. I'd say you're upstate.
Well, so now that we got that argument out of the way, I feel like we've accomplished something. So yeah, if you want to hear more of that, atp.fm/join. It was an adventure. All right, let's do some follow-up. Apparently, this is the follow-up that will not die. I mean, the follow-up that keeps continuing. Tell me about the latest developments with your Kobo and your e-readers.
I think this is it. I know I say this.
You said that the last 2 weeks.
I know I did. I think this is it. All right, so I mentioned last episode I had switched from the Kobo Sage to the slightly smaller Kobo Libra 2 device, and a couple of people pointed out that the Libra 2 doesn't support Dropbox. Which I didn't know at the time. It's like I'd only used it for like a day, and so I hadn't noticed. Oh, this feature that I like, this Dropbox feature that the Sage has, the Libra 2 doesn't actually have it, and I was a little disappointed by that. And I thought,
so pause.
Right.
Remind me what was the draw for Dropbox integration? Because that is not something I feel like I have ever wanted on the Kindle, but I have a feeling you're using it for a purpose that I either am not expecting or just not something that I do. So remind me what's the purpose there?
Well, the main purpose and the reason it's on the Sage supports a stylus where you can like draw or take notes on pages. The main reason I think it's there is so you can like export your notes that you make into something that's easily accessed elsewhere. But what I use it for is I have ebooks from various sources that like sometimes if you buy like not pirated, if you buy like an O'Reilly one or something like that, like sometimes you'll buy an EPUB file. And or you'll buy something that is downloadable as an EPUB file without DRM. A lot of the like tech instructional stuff a lot of times comes this way. I bought a couple of ebooks recently that came that way. And so you'll have an EPUB file like, all right, how do I read this easily? And you can drag it into Apple Books or whatever. Or I can drop it in this Dropbox folder that I just have a Dropbox folder now for the Kobo, and any EPUB files or PDFs I can stick there, and then I can get them on the Kobo and read them that way. So that's my main use.
Is there no, and I'm viewing everything through the lens of Kindle because it's the only thing I'm familiar with. With the Kindle, you get like a bespoke email address, I think at like kindle.com or something like that, and you can email a PDF or an EPUB or what have you to there, and then it will send you an email back and be like, "Are you sure you want to do this?"
No, it doesn't. Your email. No, well, you can give it like permitted email address sources to say like if I send it from this, and that's how Instapaper's Kindle integration works. It was a long time ago. I reverse engineered the Kindle Mobi format the way they were doing like newspaper and magazine periodical support, because they would devise this like table of contents structure out of it. And so I reverse engineered that, figured out what they were doing, and then did it with Instapaper. So that Instapaper would basically generate, and it still works this way. It would generate a Kindle format periodical file and send it to that email address that you would enter in the Instapaper control panel. Right. Anyway, it's a little bit tricky with Kindles because at least back then, I don't know if this is still the case. I think it might be. But back then, Kindles didn't support EPUB. They had their own custom format that was based on the ancient Mobi or MOBA Pocket format. And you could email documents to their service, and it would actually convert them to Kindle format on Amazon's end, and then send them over to Kindle. And Kobo, as far as I know, doesn't need to do that. It seems like the device just natively opens EPUBs without any other effort involved.
But my point in interrupting earlier was that there exists such a thing with Kobo as well. There's some email you can send things to?
No. So the way Kobo normal, as far as I can tell, I looked for that. As far as I can tell, to send stuff to it electronically, the only way to do it is this Dropbox integration on the Sage. And apparently the only other way to get stuff on it is to connect it to your computer with a USB cable, and it shows up as a USB storage device, and you can drag files over that way, which is fine, but not great, Anyway, so I posted about this on Mastodon, and a few people, including Stefano Costantini, wrote in that there's actually a hack and I use the term hack very loosely. It's very easy. There's this third-party hack app called Nickel Menu for Kobos, and the way you hack this is you connect it to your computer as a drive, and you just put this file on the drive, and when you eject it, the Kobo sees this file, reboots, and so it must have some kind of checking for plugins kind of system. That's how it feels. It feels like an OS plugin that's kind of unofficial, but the Kobo just loads it. And then once you load this plugin, then you have an extra menu on the bottom of your Kobo, and there's a few little incantations you could put in this config file, one of which will enable Dropbox support on the Libre 2. And there's also the Libre 2 version is super easy. There's apparently a couple other methods you can use for other older Kobos. Anyway, all this is to say, in 5 seconds, I had Dropbox support hacked onto my Libre 2 by basically sticking this file on the USB drive version of it, and that was it. That's all I had to do. So I'll put the links in the show notes. Obviously, when you're installing random hacks from the internet onto a device, it is worth considering what is the security surface area that I'm exposing here, and so. So what I did for the Dropbox support was I have a secondary Dropbox account that only has access to one folder, and then I share it with my primary account. So that way, because I figure if this third party thing ends up being untrustworthy in the future or presently or whatever, what do they have access to? Well, they have access to a handful of ebooks, and that's it. A Dropbox account that has access to none of my other stuff. So the surface area I decided was small. Obviously, you can make your own decisions on that. It's still a device on your network and stuff like that. So that's up to you. But I decided this hack was worth it, and now I have Dropbox, and it's great. There's a couple other things that it enables that I don't really need, so I'm just really using it for that.
That's cool. So we'll have some links that Marco provided in the show notes. John, we have all sorts of genuinely interesting news and feedback and whatnot with regard to multiple displays on M1 and M2 Macs. We were talking about, I don't remember when in the episode we were talking about it. We were talking about how the MacBook Air doesn't support more than one external display, and we were trying to theorize whether or not that was Apple being jerks and doing that in software, or is it really a hardware problem or something? So what is the verdict on this, John?
Yeah, it was in the context of the 15-inch MacBook Air. People were saying, saying the 15-inch MacBook Air is great, except in corporate environments where people really want two displays, and if the M1 and M2 only support one. Right. So Mathis Woolworld says the M1 and M2 chips only have two display controllers, one for the built-in display and one that can run the external display. The display controllers are not part of the GPU. They are separate bits on the SoC. On the Mac Mini, the internal display controller signal is piped out to a chip that converts it to HDMI, so that's why the Mac Mini's got an HDMI port on the back. The controller that drives the internal display seems not to be able to output display port signals. It seems from die shots that Apple's using a lot of die area for the display controllers. Richard Stevens continues that Hector Martin, who does Asahi Linux, how do you pronounce that?
Asahi, and it's I think it's actually
and,
it's Hector Marcan, I believe.
Oh yeah, well Richard Stevens says Hector Martin, but I think you're right. Anyway, ASAHI Linux. It's the Linux that runs on your M1 and M2 Macs, right? And they've been figuring out how to tap into all of the hardware features of the M1 and M2 SoCs, including, the GPUs and the display drivers and everything, so they know a lot about these internals. Anyway, Hector had a bunch of tweets that were since deleted, but Richard found them in the Internet Archive. Here's what Hector had to say. Why does the M1/M2 only support one external display? Because Apple's display controllers are so fancy pants that the M1 Max has more silicon dedicated to display controllers than CPU cores. They can't fit any more of these on the cheap chips. Compare the display area in the die shot below to the power CPU cores, excluding the L2 cache. One display controller is larger than 2 power CPU cores combined, with enough spare left over to cover the efficiency CPUs as well. M1 Max has 4 of them, plus the internal one, which is on top of the eCPUs, not annotated in the die shot. So I actually additionally annotated the die shot that's in our little show notes here. We'll try to put a link to the old Twitter thread in the show notes for you to look at. You can see that the display controllers are pretty large, especially when you compare them to the power CPU core.
Isn't that performance? Not rather than power,
performance,
CPU.
power, whatever. Like the good ones, the fast ones, the big ones, right? The efficiency CPU cores are really small. I'm not reading that from the text because in the text it's PCPU and eCPU as abbreviations. Yep. It's kind of cheating because like, just exclude the cache. Well, you can't really exclude the cache because you're including what looks to be very regular memory region the display controllers. But anyway, all this is to say is this is a hardware limitations of the SoC, and Apple decided to make it this way. And one reasonable theory about why they decided to make it this way is that the display controllers are surprisingly large. When you're budgeting out how much space and therefore how much power and how much cost you have to allocate to all different functionality on an SoC, maybe for your low-end chip you decide 2 display controllers should be enough. And so you burn almost as much area as half of the power CPU cores. I did it again. Performance CPU cores as you did in the other things. Now, doesn't mean that Apple can't change their mind about that. It could be that having the M1 and M2 both be like this, only support 2 external displays with 2 display controllers, has garnered enough complaints that the M3 may make a different choice. We'll see. So stay tuned for that. But anyway, on the M1 and M2, the display support is not Apple artificially limiting you to something. It is a decision Apple made when they designed the M1 and M2 SoC in terms of allocating space for drivers. But that doesn't mean, as we've talked about in many past shows, and we will now talk about again, that you can't actually have 2 displays attached to your M1 and M2. How can that be? So Edward Munn writes and says, it is possible to get the M1/M2 MacBook Air to support multiple external monitors by using a dock that supports display length with the correct drivers installed. Display length does have its drawbacks, however. You can only watch DRM content in a browser by disabling hardware rendering. You cannot watch content within the TV app, and a message displays when logging in saying that the screen is being monitored.
Oh.
Besides that.
Yeah. I don't know. A lot of people are in this setup, and I don't know if these are universal. I think you can use display link stuff and not see some of these. But anyway, I don't speak from much experience. So Edward continues, despite these drawbacks, it does allow for a one-cable solution for multiple monitors and charging. And then Edward says, lastly, I find it amusing that this M2 MacBook Air can natively support a 4K HDR 144Hz monitor or even a 6K monitor, but requires workarounds to display 2 tiny 1080p monitors. I mean, it just goes to show, it's not the resolution or the number of pixels, it's the fact that, hey, are you a separate display that I have to deal with? Then I have to have a display controller for you, or I have to do something else. Steve McWee writes, I have 2 24-inch HP monitors running off a base model M1 Air using the wavelength USB 3.0 to HDMI adapter. And finally, Leor Shakade says, yes, DisplayLink is an external driver. Yes, it uses screen recording to send data out as data packets over Thunderbolt instead of using native display control protocol. Yes, docks that support it are less common and more expensive than comparable alternatives. But at the end of the day, it does the job of connecting multiple external displays to M1/M2 Max. And the reason I think this is relevant is because in my experience in the corporate world, terrible docks like this that support multiple displays were ubiquitous. They were everywhere. Even before ARM on Mac, everyone had one of these third-party docking things that you would connect your laptop to that would let you have multiple displays, whether it's for your Macs or for your Dell laptops or whatever it was. I don't know, did they all use this display link tunneling video over USB, or was it just a common product? But either way, I think this is the corporate solution to, hey, I've got an M1 or M2 and I want more than one monitor. It's like, well, deal with this. It's a little bit janky. It's a little bit weird. I bet the video quality probably has some compromises as well. I don't know all the technical details, but that's what you have to do. But, and it seems like for the 15-inch MacBook Air, I assume those limitations will continue to be the case. But maybe for the M3, they'll do something better.
Indeed. All right, and then Ryan Maxwell wrote in, Marco dismissed the idea pretty strongly that Apple would intentionally cripple the MacBook Air to segment the product lines and try to upsell users, which for the record I agreed with. My first Mac was an iBook G4, and one of the main differences between an iBook and a PowerBook G4 was that the PowerBook supported extending your desktop to an external display. The iBook just supported mirroring. The problem was the iBook G4 was totally capable of supporting extending. It was just a firmware lock. There was a very popular utility that many of us used to unlock the feature. It worked great. I can imagine such hacks are much harder these days. We'll put a couple of links to relevant information in the show notes.
A couple of people have this story. Some people thought it was iBook G3 or G4. This is back in the days when the Pro laptops were called PowerBooks. It's not that Apple has never done this, and it's, they would never do it. It's just not common practice. I mean, giving this example from the days of the iBook and the PowerBook shows how old it was. There's probably a couple more modern examples, but in general, that's not how Apple segments. They segment by designing the M1 chip to only have display controllers. Like, it's baked into the hardware. It makes a chip smaller, cheaper, lower power, so on and so forth. And Apple hopes that they have struck the right balance between costs and power efficiency and features. Maybe they haven't with the M1 and M2. Maybe they'll change their mind. But like that's the point at which they're making the decision. It's not like they're making a chip capable of driving 7 displays and they say, oh, but 7 displays on a MacBook Air, they would never buy our Pro products. Quick, we need to cripple it. They tend not to do that. And if they do that, it's a pretty terrible mistake because that means when they were designing the chip, they made the wrong choice, right? Like if that's part of their design, that we want to segment the line and give people a reason to upgrade, they would bake that into the hardware because then that would give you a smaller and cheaper chip, the two things that Apple cares about. And yes, also more power efficient, which customers care about. So, that sometimes Apple makes the wrong choice with hardware, but the wrong choice for you might be the right choice for somebody else.
We are brought to you this week by Trade Coffee. If you love drinking coffee every morning, and who doesn't, you have to check out Trade Coffee. Trade makes it effortless to brew better coffee at home by empowering coffee lovers to discover better coffee delivered fresh to their door. Trade is a coffee subscription service that makes it so simple to discover new coffees and make your best cup of coffee at home every day. This is a wonderful way to get fresh roasted coffee delivered to your house. It makes such a difference when you have fresh roasted coffee. If you've only ever bought grocery store coffee, because of the supply chain, the way that whole thing works, it's super stale and super old. Fresh roasted coffee is where it's at. And Trade partners with the nation's top-rated independent roasters to send you the best quality coffee you can get, handpicked by their coffee experts. Now, whether you already know what you like, or whether you're new to specialty coffee and you need some help, Trade makes it super easy and convenient to discover new coffees. And they send it fresh roasted right to your home on whatever your preferred schedule is. I personally have used Trade a lot now for a long time. And I love the coffees I get from there. They're so varied, and yet they all fit my taste. I answered some questions at the beginning of kind of what I liked, and their recommendations have been spot on. And I love the variety I get. I'm getting to know all different roasters from all around the country I never would have known about otherwise, and it's super great having fresh roasted coffee sent to you. I love Trade. I'm a huge fan. Upgrade your morning routine with better coffee. Right now, Trade's offering you a free bag of coffee with any subscription at drinktrade.com/ATP. That's drinktrade.com/ATP for a free bag of coffee with any subscription purchase. drinktrade.com/ATP. Thank you so much to Trade for keeping me caffeinated and sponsoring our show.
With regard to Final Cut Pro and the iPad, Chris writes, my 1 terabyte 13-inch M1 iPad Pro has 16 gigs of RAM and virtual memory, so the inability to round trip projects is definitely not a hardware issue. For what it's worth, not every M1 iPad Pro has 16 gigs of RAM. They can come with as quote-unquote little as 8. And then I don't know what the virtual memory story is on iPad OS. I know that that's a relatively new development, but I can't recall the specifics. John, do you happen to remember?
Yeah, I just want to add that M1, the minimum amount of RAM, I believe, is 8 gigs. I don't think Apple has ever sold it with less than 8 gigs. So if you've got an M1, you've got 8 gigs, and you may have more. The reason I put the virtual memory note in here is because I said it on last week's show, and we talked about it again. It's become the sort of colloquial way to talk about this topic. But, this is a tech show, and I'll hold on to this one as long as I can. iPads have always had virtual memory, forever. What they haven't had is they didn't use swap. They wouldn't take things out of RAM and swap them to, flash storage and back. Those are two different things. Virtual memory just means that the addresses that your program is using are not addresses in RAM. They are virtual addresses that are somewhere in a virtual address space, and every process gets its own gigantic virtual address space of a given size. And it's like, well, how can every single process in the computer have the same address space? Aren't they stomping over each other's memory? No, because those aren't the real addresses. Those are virtual addresses. And there's a bunch of hardware in there that translates from virtual addresses to hardware addresses. And at that point, the hardware and the operating system makes sure that two processes don't stomp on each other by using the same physical address. So basically all systems that run Darwin, the core of what was Mac OS X, have and always have had virtual memory, but iOS devices and iPad OS for the longest time did not have swap, which meant that when RAM was getting close to being exhausted, they would say, oh, don't worry about it. This stuff that's in RAM, I'll write it to quote unquote disk in a big giant file. And if someone needs it again, I'll go get it from there. And to make room for it, I'll take something that is in RAM and put it back there. And anyway, doing that a lot is called swapping. That is called the swap file. And iPad OS did not have that for a long time, but now does support it on certain hardware configurations. I'm not familiar with details, just like Casey. We talked about when it rolled out, but I only imagine it'll become more prevalent. But the point is, it's not a limitation. The big beefy iPads do support swap. I just want to be a little bit careful about saying they support virtual memory, because maybe I'll lose that battle. Maybe just eventually people will just, well, when you say virtual memory, you don't mean virtual memory.
Yeah, you've lost that battle.
I don't think so, though, because the problem is they've always had virtual memory, and there's no other word for virtual memory than virtual memory. Yeah. Like they've always had it.
But I feel like, virtual memory has been supported since like the 386. So I don't think it's the kind of thing you have to say that modern computers support or don't support. Every computer supports virtual. Like most people's fridges probably support virtual memory at this point. Like, so that's not.
But there's no other name for it, though.
It's like saying, yeah, my computer supports math. Yeah, most computers support math.
I know, but if you were trying to reuse that term, say my computer can do addition, it's like, well, I don't mean addition. I mean it'll take memory and write it out to persistent storage. I'm like, well, it's totally different. Why are you using that term? Anyway, I would say it doesn't have swap, doesn't use swap, virtual memory with swap. I don't even know how Apple describes it in their thing, but I just want people.
I believe they called it virtual memory swap. When they had it on like one of those little bubble words on the slide.
Some technical person said, you can't just call it virtual memory, you got to put the word swap. Virtual memory swap, I think that 3-word phrase, use that one. That one works. But virtual memory, it's really confusing for me to hear people say, does your iPad support virtual memory? I'm like, yeah, it does.
And so does yours. And so do all of them ever.
Exactly.
And so does your watch.
Right.
And your fridge, probably.
Yeah.
All right, so bringing you back to Final Cut Pro, I thought this feedback was excellent, and I probably should have known this having had a brief window of time when I kind of knew Final Cut Pro, but because my usage was so rudimentary, I never really put this together. So Brendan writes, as an occasional Final Cut Pro user for over a decade, I'm extremely confident that the lack of round trip has nothing to do with performance whatsoever, and everything with the way Final Cut Pro 10 handles project files. It's extremely flexible and allows assets, proxies, and cached renders to be segmented out on different volumes and storage types. That is extremely useful and necessary in professional video editing environments. So I don't see a new project format coming along soon on the Mac side to replace that if it needs to adhere to the current limitations of iPad OS. So in other words, like one of the things, and maybe one of you can have a better explanation here, but one of the things that we needed a lot more years ago was if you're working with these like super high resolution video files, that's really computationally intensive for the computer to do as you're scanning through them and so on and so forth. So the Final Cut Pro would make these quote unquote proxy files, which basically means it'll downsample your 4K video to like 720p. That it'll use for the purposes of doing the edits and getting the everything lined up. And then when you finally did the one true export, it'll go back to the source material and render it in 4K or what have you. And that was proxy media, or I forget what they call it, proxy something or other. And there's all sorts of other things too. And yeah, Final Cut Pro will often generate this on its own behind the scenes, and you can be explicit if you so choose and tell it, I want the proxy media to go here, I want the regular stuff to go there, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think Brendan makes a good point that it is extremely flexible, which is wonderful, particularly if you're working on like a 2-hour video or something like that. But that might not be so wonderful if you're trying to work within the extreme limitations of iPadOS.
See, I don't buy this as a format difference though, because that's true between Macs as well. If you have a project file that references assets that are all over the place, and you give that to somebody else on a Mac, and they're on their laptop across the country, and they try to open that project, it's not going to work because it's not going to be able to find all the media. Like that's just the nature of the beast. I don't think there's anything particular in iPadOS that prevents access to network storage or whatever. But again, Apple makes the operating system so they could patch these things. I think if there was a new project format on the Mac, it would, of course, continue to support that flexibility, probably. And then they could also support it on iPadOS, and it would behave exactly the same way as it does on a Mac, where it says, oh, you open this project, I don't know where the hell any of this media is. I tried to connect to the server, but it's not accessible on my network. I don't know where it is. Sorry. Like, that's the nature of complicated formats like this. So it is another thing to consider that dealing with that on iPadOS may be slightly more difficult because of sandboxing and the inability to mount network drives, as far as we know. But Apple does make the OS, and they can they can make all that possible. So it's still a little bit of a mystery. I would love to hear a technical explanation from somebody at Apple of why the project format is different. I would hope they wouldn't say, well, the iPad is a little less like sort of just a vague answer that doesn't tell us anything. Because they can't, I don't think Apple can say with a straight face, is kind of the point of this follow-up. I don't think they can say with a straight face anymore that it's a power limitation, especially for the people with like a 16 gig iPad Pro with an M1. And they're no, there's no excuse for in terms of horsepower or power and swap, right? Virtual memory swap, as Apple would say. It's got it all, right? So what's the problem? I continue to hope, fingers crossed, that it is just an updated project format that will eventually come to the Mac. And if and when it does, to Brendan's point, it will have to support all of the existing workflows, if they are an essential part of people's business, which I think they are.
Indeed. And then finally, I think it was like right in the beginning of the year, I forget exactly when it was, but Dell announced their own kind of knockoff version of the Pro Display XDR. You might remember this because it had a truly enormous webcam that stuck up above the top forehead of the monitor. If memory serves, it had a little drop down connectivity port that would come off the bottom of the monitor, which I actually think was kind of cool, but I'm not sure many share that opinion with me. But anyways, this is a 32-inch 6K monitor, the so eloquently named the U3224KB. Well, apparently pricing has been released, and it is $3,200, which normally would make me do a spit take. But remind me how much your ridiculously overpriced monitors were, gentlemen.
Well, are you including the stand?
Yeah, yes, don't forget, this comes with a stand. So it's $3,200, comes with a height adjustable stand, and this thing has, to remind everybody, up to 140 watts of power delivery, a 4K webcam, a huge array of ports, just a ton of ports all over it. Has slightly higher resolution than the XDR. It's 6144 by 3456 instead of the XDR's 6016 by 3384. Sorry about the way I read that number. Just deal with it. They're also, because this is Dell, we'll put a link to the product page. They make a whole line of these monitors, and you can change tons of things about them. This monitor is available in the following sizes in inches: 24, 27, 30, 32, 34, 38, 43, and 49 inches.
Well,
and
but slow down though. But that doesn't necessarily mean 6K in all of them.
Right, exactly. And it goes up to 8K as well. So there's the smaller monitors are different resolutions, and the bigger monitors can be different. But I'm saying this is the matrix of different features. So you can't get all the resolutions at all the sizes, obviously, but there's a lot of choices here. Like I said, including up to 8K. I think the 8K version is like $4,000 or something. Now, this is not really an XDR quote-unquote replacement, because I don't think any of the combinations of sizes and resolutions support HDR up to 1600 nits. I don't know if they have mini LED backlights. But hey, $3,200 for XDR resolution. If you don't care about HDR, and you don't mind looking at what is a very unattractive monitor, in my opinion, it's a good deal. That's what we were wondering about the whole time. We were talking about this at CES. We were making fun of the looks. We were looking at all the ports. But well, how much is this going to cost? And the question was, how much will it undercut the XDR by? And I think $3,200 with adjustable stand is a good price. That is a way better deal than the XDR.
Well, you said you have a lot of options available here. but none of those options make it super nice as as an Apple replacement.
No, there is no option for beauty on this monitor.
Yes, but so I think this is a very good deal relative to what else is in the market, which, as far as I know, is just the XDR, like in this kind of resolution and size class. I don't think there's anything else really. I could be wrong, but I'm not aware of any.
I mean, I'm sure there are other makers making monitors with this same panel, but Dell is a reputable brand, and you know what I mean. So
yeah, but I think so. For this to be $3,200 and the XDR to be with the stand $6,000, yeah, this is a really good deal. I would at least, though, I would caution people, if it's been a while since you've used an Apple computer with a third-party monitor, the experience is not always as seamless as you would hope it should be. It's not like the olden days, because the olden days things were simpler. We didn't have things like HDR and all these like new DRM schemes for movie protection and stuff like that. So on some level, like I am not tempted by this. Obviously, I already have the XDR, so that's a huge difference. But I'm not tempted by this because my experiences with my ultra-fine LG monitor have been pretty paper cutty, in part because the ultra-fine is just such a mediocre monitor, but also in part because Apple does not seem to take much effort at all in making the experience good for third-party monitor users. And oftentimes, as Apple's computers move forward, as the hardware and software move forward, oftentimes it seems like the number of paper cuts that you get by using a third-party monitor is increasing over time. So while you are able to save a good amount of money going with this option, you are giving up a lot of niceness, and you're setting up for possible paper cut issues that you might not get with a first-party monitor. And that's not to say that like Apple is making the best monitors here. It's just to say the reality of the situation is you're in an integrated environment if you're using this with a Mac, and you're going to miss out on some of those integrations. And it might not be, there might be annoyances or limitations by going with this that we don't really know about yet, or that you might not be thinking of, that are worth considering when you're making a decision.
I think a lot of the fault is going to lie with the monitor maker. That's why I was suggesting maybe Dell over somebody else, because I think there is like driver software that you might have to install on your Mac to get all the features of this monitor to work. And that's kind of the responsibility of the third-party monitor maker. You would hope Apple would work together with them better. But that is, it's like, who's to blame here? Is it Apple because they don't care about making stuff work with third-party monitors? Or is it the third-party monitor maker because they stopped caring about the drivers for macOS after a few years because they've already made their money on that monitor? They don't care who already bought it. To give one, I don't know if this is an example that, puts Apple in a good light, but it is something that happened. Before Apple sold monitors, besides the XDR, or even maybe before the XDR, the M1 and M2, for example, even though they can only drive one monitor, they can drive the LG 5K, I believe, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
And so the LG 5K is a third-party monitor. It was the only, Apple Retina resolution third-party monitor for a long time while we were asking for Apple to make one again, other than the XDR.
Well, there was the 4K for a while, and then they changed it, which made it slightly less Retina-y. But it was the LGs, the two LGs, the 4K and the 5K.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess the 4K 24-inch was close to that. But anyway, the 5K was the big one, right? Until Apple, Apple had the XDR, but until Apple came up with Studio Display. And the LG 5K is weird and requires Apple to do some stuff to support. That Apple did. Like, as far as I'm aware, you didn't have to install any LG drivers, right, for the LG 5K?
Correct.
That's correct.
So part of that, you could say, okay, well, that's not Apple doing it out of the goodness of their heart. It's because the LG 5K is basically the same monitor that was in a 5K iMac, and they had already done the work for that. But the fact is that the M1, when it first came out, could drive a third-party monitor, and Apple had to do some work to make that happen. Because for people who don't know, we talked about it when the 5K iMac first came out, which was ages ago. The 5K iMac, in fact, Apple bragged about it. That's why we knew about it. The 5K iMac had its special, Apple custom timing controller, because it's basically like two internal logical displays with like two parallel display stream things going in there, and then a controller that synchronizes them. That's how you get 5K resolution over one cable internal to the 5K iMac.
Well, that was true at the time. It is a little bit different now, but carry on.
Yes. But I think the LG 5K today, if you connect it to an M1 over a single cable, it's doing the display stream multiplexing. It's more commonplace now, but Apple had to support that. My point is, with the M1, they could have chose not to support it because none of their monitors do stuff like that, or maybe just the XDR or whatever. So I don't know. Again, I don't know if that is Apple making an effort to say, oh, well, since we don't sell any monitors like this, we should make sure the LG 5K works because it's the only game in town. Or just saying, well, we already basically did that work for the 5K iMac, so we get it for free, so we might as well do it. But it is a thing that happened. The Dell ones, on the other hand, especially the 6K thing with the camera and all the ports, I imagine you're going to be relying on Dell keeping its drivers and software up to date to have all the features of that monitor working. How good is Dell at doing that? Probably better than some random no-name brand that you just found online, right? But maybe not as good as you want it to be, to Marco's point, especially years down the line.
Yeah, it's still Dell at the end of the day. And Dell also, they're not going to care nearly as much about how it works on a Mac than they are how it works on their PCs that they sell, or other PCs.
I thought I saw the word Mac mentioned on the product page, so let me search for it again.
I mean, they'll take our money, but you better believe they're not going to have amazing driver support if they don't have to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just happy to see the word mentioned. This monitor is compatible with multiple operating systems, including Windows and Mac OS. They'll are in a circle. I guess, what are the other ones? Linux? But anyway, they are at least mentioning it. So I think they understand who would want a monitor with this kind of pixel density at this size. There is some possibility that it might be a Mac user.
We are brought to you this week by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform for building your brand and growing your business online. Stand out with a beautiful website, engage with your customers, and sell anything. Your products, your content, even your time. Squarespace makes it super easy to make any kind of website. There are entire classes of problems that you don't have to deal with. Coding, web design, hosting, security patches, running servers, all that stuff. You don't have to deal with any of that. And Squarespace makes it super great to build any kind of website, especially business websites. They now have storefront features, member area features, email campaigns. So much is built into Squarespace, and it's all as easy to use as all their other web building tools have been over time. So I can recommend Squarespace to anybody without having to worry that they're going to have to come to me with a lot of technical questions, or they're going to get frustrated and give up or do something wrong. All of that's off the table with Squarespace. Anybody can use it. And even if you're an expert, frankly, it's nice not to have to get in there and run servers and code stuff and all that stuff. They take care of all that for you. And the store features are so advanced now. So you can, of course, sell physical goods. Yeah, they have a full suite of features around that. You can also sell digital goods. So if whatever it is you're selling digital, you can do that. You can even sell time slots. So suppose you're like a trainer or a coach, you can sell time slots for that. You can have membership support with member areas. So if you're selling videos or online courses or newsletters, all that's supported now too. And all of this is backed by powerful other business features that you might need. Analytics, SEO tools, email campaigns, whatever you need for your business, Squarespace probably supports it. It's really great. You can see for yourself by building a trial site, no credit card required, at squarespace.com/ATP. Build your trial site, see how good it is for you. Trust me, you're going to like it. When you're ready to launch, use offer code ATP at purchase to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Once again, squarespace.com/ATP, code ATP for 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you so much to Squarespace for sponsoring our show.
What do we have to talk about tonight?
Well, first we can talk about whether I use this phrase correctly, and I shouldn't be asking you to. Maybe we can get some young people in the chat to weigh in. What I wrote as the top topic here is WWDC vibe check. My use of that term is in the sense that we are seeing how we all kind of feel about WWDC being 2 weeks out from it. Is that the correct use of the term vibe check? Do we have, and we don't have any young, who are we kidding? There are no young people in the chat room. I don't know why I'm thinking this. Like,
all that matters is is our audience old enough to think that we are using it correctly? Whether or not we actually are or not.
Well put.
So here's the thing. I know young people listen to the podcast. Hello out there. We love that you listen to it. Tell your friends. Tell your nerdy friends, which is what I always say. Because if you tell your regular friends, they're going to listen and think it's super weird. But tell your nerdy friends. Anyway, but people who listen live, like there's a very tiny number of dedicated people who are in our chat room right now who listen to the live stream of this as we record it.
And we love
I have to imagine, because the number is so small, the percentage that might be young people there is probably very low.
Yeah,
that is probably accurate. But I will say, as an official old, I do believe you are using the term correctly. And yes. So
again, I don't know how much stock I put in any of our
agreed.
opinions of whether I'm using it correctly.
Yep. Totally agree.
I mean,
with
I do have teenagers, so I feel like I have a leg up on you two at least.
Yep.
But I could just learn through osmosis by hearing them say things. But
well, who's less likely to know about cool slang? Like a random, 40 whatever year old or a 40 whatever year old with teenage children. I almost think the people without the teenage children are more likely to get it right because the teenagers will try harder to hide it from you when they're your kids.
Oh my gosh.
No, you can't help you'll see when you have a teenager, you can't help but hear them speak all the time and them talk to their friends, and they will say things to you using the same language they talk to their friends, whether they mean it or not.
I mean, look, we get some of that now, but like it's funny, like so going around, my kid and his friends going around that group is this, I don't know, I'm sure it came from a YouTuber, but some kind of joke where they are like, what's 9 plus 10, and like 27 or whatever, and everyone laughs. It's like, okay, and I don't get it at all. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm already at the point where, the kids are doing stuff that I don't understand at all, that, every generation goes through this. And like, I'm thinking like, when we start saying things like vibe check, like I'm already so disconnected from what the young kids are saying and what they think is funny and whatever references they're making from their YouTube celebrities they follow. There is no way in hell that we're using this term correctly. Like we're too old. We should avoid anything that even seems like modern slang. We should just stick with the phrases that are licensed for old people use.
Yeah, someone in the chat room says that the idea is that you're checking to see how somebody's doing. It's more like checking in with them. I don't know. I'll ask my kids after. Anyway, I've defined the term as we're using it here. If we're using it wrong, at least you know what I mean, because the goal is communication. Although I will say, I remember on a recent episode, I heard Casey say something that I actually talked to my daughter about, that I'm wondering where Casey heard it. He probably heard it from the same place my daughter did, with some kind of popular media or like a sitcom or something that
I'm getting so scared.
You did you used the term. You were, I don't know. One of my phrases that I would use for it is so on and so forth, etc. Sort of one of those where you're trying to say, and other things like this. I'm not going to list them all. You know what I'm talking about, right? And the phrase you use is whatever. You say whatever twice. Whatever obviously was from our generation. We all know about whatever, or my generation anyway. Whatever, Gen X, it's totally a thing, right? Whatever. Saying it in that particular way. Whatever. I can't, I heard my daughter say it, and I talked to her and I said, is whatever, is that a you thing, or is that a common thing among
I have
people
no idea.
Your age? And she said, no, it's not a me thing. It's just a thing that people my age say. And so, took her word for it. And then I heard Casey say it a few times, like,
Did I?
Yeah. Where did Casey pick up whatever? So it must
now
be
I want
somewhere.
to know.
I don't think you picked up from your kids. Do either one of your kids say whatever when relaying a story about something?
I don't think so, no.
So it's probably from some television show or something like that. And people keep comparing it to yada yada and saying yada yada, like that Seinfeld that made up that thing yada yada. Seinfeld did not make up yada yada. Seinfeld popularized it for the rest of the world. It's not the metro New York area, but rest assured, yada yada existed long before Seinfeld.
Well, this has been Language Corner. But yeah, so let's talk about how we feel about WWDC, however you want to phrase that. How are we feeling? Since I'm talking, I guess I'll just start. I am excited. I never get any concrete information about anything in any regard from any of the people I know inside Apple, but I can tell you that now I don't want to say vibe, but I was going to say vibe. The impression I get from the people
think we can use
Apple.
vibe. I think we all understand and know how to use vibe. I think that's a thing that predates a lot of teenagers who are alive today.
All right, fair enough. The vibe from people inside Apple is that they are like vibrating, like they are real excited. At least that's the impression I've gotten. I wish I could tell you that I'm being coy and I know exactly what's happening and when it's happening, so on and so forth. I genuinely know nothing. But
our sources aren't that good.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
Here's the thing: the people you know and like the vibe you're getting from people at Apple, they probably don't know anything either, right? That's the thing that a lot of people who are new to the world of Apple might not understand. When we're watching some kind of presentation and Apple's presenting something, the vast majority of the Apple employees are just as surprised as we are because they compartmentalize everything. If you don't need to know about Project XYZ, you don't know about it. And so it's not like we're watching and they're like, well, every Apple employee already knows this. No, every Apple employee does not know this. So if Apple employees are vibrating, they could be coming off the same thing that we are, which is like, we feel like there's something big coming. And they literally don't know what it is because they're not disclosed, as they say, on the headset or on the car or on the whatever the hell. Like they literally don't know. But because they are employees and work there, you can kind of get a feel from, because maybe they know someone who does work on that team, or they know someone who knows someone, and those people seem happy all the time, or they seem frantic all the time.
Or they've been working nonstop for the last 2 months. You know?
Exactly. Like that's the vibe that they're getting that we're not getting, and that is being transferred to us.
Yeah, my favorite example of this is, after the Swift announcement in like 14 or whenever it was, I was talking to a handful of internal Apple people, and of the, 5 or 10 people I spoke to, I think maybe 1 or 2 of them was aware that Apple was working on a new language to release at some point, but I don't think a single one of them knew that the Swift announcement was happening that day. So they're sitting there, in their office or whatever, watching the keynote and saying, "Oh, that's cool." At the same time that I'm looking over at John saying, "Oh, that's cool." Like they all found out at the exact same moment for something as big as Swift. So, I mean, not literally all of them, but you know what I'm saying. So, whatever, John.
Actually, for the Swift example specifically, that's another example of how tricky it is to read the tea leaves at Apple. Way back in the day, I'd written a bunch of blog posts at Ars Technica, which have since been moved to my own website, talking about Apple's needs for a new programming language. And in response to those posts, lots of people from Apple either reached out to me, back channel, I talked to them at WWDC, and we would have discussions on the topic that I wrote about. Obviously, almost all of them didn't know anything about what Apple would eventually do in this area, but some of them did, right? And we would have discussions about it. And in hindsight, I can see that a lot of those discussions, you could tell which one of these people that I was talking about this 4 years before Swift was announced knew Swift existed or whatever, or like 2 years, 1 year leading up to it. That's the way that you can get a vibe from Apple people. The problem is, though, tons of stuff is happening inside Apple that never sees the light of day. And so you can have a discussion with somebody that makes you, I totally think from all these discussions I've been having with Apple people, they seem really excited about whatever, smell-o-vision, right? And I really think Apple's working on a smell-based product, and it just never sees the light of day. And you're like, oh, I guess I was wrong about that. And then you have to learn 15 years later that there was a big smell-o-vision project and it got canned because of some internal political turf war, or they decided they weren't going to do smell-o-vision.
Or it was catching on fire.
Right, exactly. So the vibe inside Apple reflects a feeling about what might be happening inside Apple. But then there's the question, okay, but what of the things that happens inside Apple comes out of Apple, and in what form and when? Another example is the TV stuff. Apple's going to make a television set. And like from what we understand from current, rumors and people revealing stuff, some of the technology that was originally made for the project where Apple was going to make a television set. I keep saying television set because I don't know how to explain this to young people, but like a TV, a big screen that you look at that plays, anyway, ended up in the HomePod of all places because they were working on audio for the HomePod. So the HomePod comes out of some work that was done on the television. There was so much smoke around TV back in the day of just like, Apple's going to make a television set, they're going to do it, it's going to be, and what we ended up getting was the HomePod and the Apple TV, and Apple never did make a television set. And we'll see where the car stuff goes. So it's difficult to read, but sometimes like the vibe you're getting, it's a legit vibe, even if Apple never ships any of that stuff in the form you think they're going to. But in this case, I feel like the vibe about the headset is so strong and so lightning focused and so detailed with the rumors that, where there's smoke, there's surely going to be fire eventually.
Yeah. And I mean, again, I'm not playing coy. I wish I knew, and I was playing coy, but I'm not. But I don't know. I just feel like, based on no facts and just a gut feeling, I feel like there's going to be a lot this year, even if it isn't the headset. I still feel like it's going to be a busy keynote. Obviously, the drop of Final Cut Pro and Logic Pro just last week, that could, lend credence to the idea that it's going to be busy. But I don't know. I feel like there's going to be a lot here. And
if there's no headset, how can it be busy? Explain that to me.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I really don't know. But I mean, there, as a couple of examples off the top of my head, it sounds like we're getting an all-new watchOS, or for some loose definition of all new, which we may or may not talk about this episode. We should be getting widget support on iPadOS. Trying to think of other things. Presumably there'll be a lot of improvements to Swift UI. I mean, this is a developer conference, strictly speaking. So hopefully we'll see a lot of Swift UI improvements. I'm not sure. I feel like they could fill an hour to an hour and a half with just normal software stuff. I mean, hell, as Chris Finazzo says in the chat, no new features in Mac OS, that would need an hour and a half just for applause, right?
That would be a crowd pleaser, but I don't know if it would count as a big keynote.
No,
I kind of feel like headset is the obvious one that would make this big. And honestly, if they have the headset, nothing else matters, essentially. Like, not that they're not, of course they're going to have new versions of all their OSs, and the new versions will have nice features, but if they have the headset, that alone makes it an extremely, like, these come rarely. When does Apple introduce new platforms? Not that often. WatchOS, tvOS, like sometimes they're big, sometimes they're small, but this is so hyped, so long rumored. It's as if they were coming out with the car, right? All you need is that. If that exists in the keynote, it is a big keynote. If that doesn't,
absolutely,
it isn't released in this keynote, I think to make it a big keynote, you need a lot of things that currently seem unlikely. I think you would need the 15-inch MacBook Air to be announced. You need all new versions of the OSs with some significant features that people care about. And I think you'd have to probably throw in the Mac Pro. That's what it would take to match the headset. And from all the rumors,
it always comes back to the Mac Pro. With you,
honestly, no one cares about the Mac Pro, but me. But if you're trying to make a big keynote, you need the things people do care about: 15-inch MacBook Air, all new versions of all the operating systems that people love, Swift with the new features, new version of Xcode, and then you throw in the Mac Pro as a fun kicker. If you remember, the Mac Pro was announced at WWDC. We were all there, I believe. The 2019 Mac Pro, that is. Mm-hmm. And I think that was like the star of the show in terms of, didn't they like leave that to the end? Like, despite the fact that nobody buys them or whatever, it is a glamour product for Apple to roll out because it's big, it's powerful, it's shiny, it's expensive, it's good looking if you like holes. And so I know people think like, oh, nobody cares about the Mac Pro. That doesn't make a big keynote. It does. It would add to the bigness of it, but you need all that stuff that I described. And on the other side of the scale, just the headset by itself.
Yeah, that's fair. But I don't know. I've been talking a long time, but suffice to say, I get the feeling that whatever it is, it's going to be a big year, which is why I really hope that the three of us get to be there. So Apple, call us. We'd love to hear from you. But no, I think it's going to be big. And I think that would be excellent because I don't feel like the last couple of years have been bad by any means, but I think just a really firing on all cylinders kind of year would be pretty awesome.
I'm excited. I'm a little bit nervous as a developer that like I'm about to have my summer, ruined in the best way. The same way it's like the Jonathan Colton song about you ruined everything in the nicest way. Like when you have a kid, it's like, oh, you ruin everything in the nicest way because you disrupt my life in a huge way. But you're my kid and I love you. I forgive the horrendous summarizing of this art form. I feel like this might be like that for developers in the sense that like whatever plans we had for this year are probably about to be derailed in a pretty big way by the headset. It seems, by all accounts, it seems like the headset is being announced at this event, and there's going to be a developer story to it, because obviously why else would they announce it if that'd be quite a move at a developer conference to be like, here's a brand new platform.
Have a sweet solution. You can make web apps for it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, you can program it only with Siri.
Oh gosh.
I would quit the business. Anyway, so I think our plans are going to be disrupted if our plans weren't, wait for the headset. It's going to be disruptive. And I think it's going to be in a very exciting way. I don't know what the headset will be. I don't know what the headset's chances are on the market. But, when I use the existing VR headset hardware that exists, on the market today, the limited amount I have used with it, although, with the exception of the Oculus whatever 2 that we have upstairs, I'm super uninterested in it, and it kind of gives me motion sickness a little bit. It doesn't work optically well with my eyes for whatever reasons. There's a lot of like minor paper cuts or major paper cuts with it, and I don't find the games that interesting. But Apple is full of really smart nerds, and many of them have apparently decided that what they have is something special and worth shipping for Apple in a pretty high-profile way. So I'm optimistic. I'm tentatively optimistic that whatever they have is probably pretty good, because I trust them to make that call, and they call it right most of the time. So whatever they have, we can look around the market and we can be super unexcited about all the other VR headsets out there, and also trust Apple to say, you know what, if they're this excited about something like this and they're thinking and they're releasing it now, there's probably something there. It's probably really good in at least some ways for at least some uses and possibly more. So, because otherwise they wouldn't be releasing it. Apple holds back on a lot of stuff. So we can be fairly sure that what does get out there, especially a new platform in a high-profile release like this is bound to be, they've done their homework. They've probably built something really cool. And it's probably going to be really exciting when we see it. So that's why I'm very interested, not in the VR or AR or XR space in general. I'm very interested in what the heck did Apple do here, because I trust them to, if they've gotten to this point, it's probably something really exciting and really good. Now, how many other people will think so and will be willing to spend $3,000 and deal with the whole butt-mounted battery situation? Who knows? We'll see when we get there. But again, I trust them to have gotten this right.
If they do that, I don't think that'll be a thing to deal with, by the way. I think that'll be a feature that everyone will say, oh, of course they did it. I mean, we've all discussed all the reasons. It's just that once the product comes out, all the reasons we've discussed suddenly become like concrete, and people say, I always thought it was a good idea because the headset weighs less and you can swap batteries and so on and so forth. But right now, everyone thinks it's dumb.
Right, and then the whole rest of the industry will change to butt batteries, and they'll be like, well, of course, this is the obvious design. We didn't copy Apple.
Exactly, right. Yeah, it was obvious. We didn't copy Apple at all. I mean, Apple's not going to be the first one to use a battery pack, external battery pack. A bunch of other people have done it anyway. I do feel like for the headset, again, I get the vibe that it's coming this year. If it's not, I think a lot of people will be disappointed. I think it's, whatever, like it would, quote unquote, justifiable. It's like, well, Apple never announced anything. That was all on you. It was just rumors. But anyway, the good thing that I hope the headset will do is provide cover for every other product. And I know this is not the way it works inside Apple, but like it's plausible that there could be enough internal communication to let the other products that are announced every WWDC, all the new versions of the new OS, the new version of Swift, updates and frameworks, the new version of Xcode, gives them some cover to not feel like they have to press to get their exciting feature out the door ASAP, even if it's buggy, because the headset is just going to block out the sun at WWDC, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of times at WWDC, I feel some groups are pressing. They're like, we really need to wow them in the keynote, and they show something, and we are wowed, but then we realize like, oh, this isn't even in the beta build at WWDC. It'll be coming in a later build, and when it does come, it's buggy and unfinished, and it just ends up being frustrating and disappointing. And it's like, you don't need to try that hard. Ship what you're actually ready to ship. Like, I don't want to see anything in any of the other sort of platform stuff that isn't in the WWDC beta, because I feel like the headset provides them cover to be more relaxed with their, with their choice of what to include and what to save for a future release. In the ideal world, I would have liked, Apple to have the forethought to say, hey, back in 2022, hey, WWDC 2023, we're going to ship the headset. So everybody else, when you're planning your new releases for the new versions of all the different OSs, everybody take a snow leopard, right? That didn't happen. Like that's, that they don't have that kind of coordination. They can't tell the future that far in advance. It's foolhardy to try to make plans like that. I do think it would be wise for them to give each platform a snow leopard once in a while. We've talked a lot about macOS not being annual if they could get the bugs out of it, but it's just too big of a company to be that coordinated and making plans that far in advance about software releases and headset. Most of, part of the reason you can't make that plan is that all the other groups aren't even probably disclosed on the headset if they don't have to be. Or subsets of them are, because only some people who work on tvOS now have to know about the headset. Not all the people, and certainly the people who work on tvOS hardware probably don't need to know about it. Anyway, it's very compartmentalized to the detriment of Apple internally, I feel like sometimes. And this is kind of one of those cases that we just assume that despite the fact that if the headset does launch at WWDC, it will provide cover for lots of other OSs. The only thing that helps them with is what I just described, which is, okay, now maybe they don't have to press. Maybe the higher levels of the org chart cannot press to have the Xcode team, push out some feature of Xcode that is buggy and going to cause the app to crash all the time. They'll say, we'll just save that to next year. It's fine that you don't have it. And they won't know that's because the headset is coming, but only like the people 7 levels up the org chart who are disclosed in the headset do know that, and they let those things travel downhill. I know this sounds Byzantine and complicated, but honestly, this is the way it works in big companies, especially ones like Apple that have everything compartmentalized. That's why reading the tea leaves is a thing. This whole kind of game of telephone of like, what gets prioritized, what gets given money, and why, by people who at various points in the chain don't have all the information available. They just know what the people above them tell them and what the people below them send back and feedback, but nobody has the whole picture until you get pretty high in the org chart, and it makes it very difficult to act in a coherent manner. Apple does an amazing job of it, to be clear. As a company, they speak with one voice. Their marketing, their PR makes it seem like they are a coherent mass, but internally it's lots of little kingdoms moving in all sorts of different directions, pushed and pulled by forces they can't see and don't understand for the most part.
Yeah.
Apple can put that slogan in their recruiting material.
We are brought to you this week by Kolide. Kolide has some big news. If you're an Okta user, they can get your entire fleet to 100% compliance. How? Well, if a device isn't compliant, the user can't log into your cloud apps until they've fixed the problem. It's that simple. Kolide patches one of the major holes in zero trust architecture, device compliance. Without Kolide, IT can struggle to solve basic problems like keeping everyone's OSs and browsers up to date. Insecure devices can be logging into your company's apps because there's nothing there to stop them. Kolide is the only device trust solution that enforces compliance as part of authentication, and it's built to work seamlessly with Okta. The moment Kolide's agent detects a problem, it alerts the user and gives them instructions on how to fix it. If they don't fix the problem within the time that you set, they're blocked. Kollide's method means fewer support tickets, less frustration, and most importantly, 100% fleet compliance. Visit Kolide.com/ATP to learn more or book a demo. That's Kolide, spelled K-O-L-I-D-E. So Kolide with a K, Kolide, KOLIDE.com/ATP. Kolide.com/ATP. Thank you so much to Kolide for sponsoring our show. So, in terms of like the overall, like what I expect from the other platforms, it's hard when in a new platform year, like what we have most likely here with the headset launching. This is a year, as John mentioned, like this doesn't happen often. This is a year of a new platform. What tends to happen with Apple when a new platform is being developed is a bunch of talent is pulled from other teams to work on that new thing, and obviously it doesn't all just happen in 1 year, but what has probably happened here is probably a bunch of people from other OSs and other projects in the company have probably been spending a lot of time recently working on the headset. And so I would expect, based on that, for not only this year, but also last year to have been somewhat slow. And I would say that's kind of the case. That being said, Apple's a bigger company now than they used to be, and they are able to maintain things on multiple fronts better than they used to be. They're still not great at it, but they're way better than they used to be. But anyway, so I would expect this to be a somewhat slow year for the other platforms. But that being said, in terms of like what is actionable for developers to do with the headset right now, I think we're going to see version 1.0 of this OS. We're going to see version 1.0 of the SDK and version 1.0 of all the frameworks and the UI and everything else. On some level, it's very exciting and very disruptive to our summers, as I was saying earlier. But also, there might just not be that much for us to do yet on it. First of all, I don't know when they plan to actually ship this thing to us, but that's going to itself be a pretty big limitation. Like, there's going to be a lot of things where we want to develop something for this, but we kind of can't until we have one. Or we can only do preliminary work, maybe in some kind of simulator or something, until we get one. Or maybe Apple will use the new developer center that they built, they opened up last year to invite developers out by invitation only. Come out to the developer center in July and August, and you can sign up for a 1 day slot to use the hardware and test your app on it. They did that with the watch, and they had like the whole dev kit situation with the transition to Apple Silicon. So they've done stuff kind of in this ballpark before. So I'm guessing that kind of thing will happen. Whether it will be open to many developers is a different question. I'm sure some developers will get invited. I don't know if it will be like anybody can sign up kind of thing. I think it'll be more likely, don't call us, we'll call you. That's much more likely, just for scale. But anyway, so I don't expect there to be a ton for developers to do on the headset yet this summer, because presumably we won't have them yet, we won't have access to them yet, and we probably will have a very early SDK. So so it's going to depend a lot on what you do. Like if you make an app or choose to make an app that is really a great thing in AR VR, then you're going to have maybe a busier time. If you make, say, a podcast player, it might not be that important. Like, it might just be, all right, find a way to show a UI, but otherwise everything else is the same. And if the stories are accurate about, like, them being able to run iPad apps in little windows, it might not be that much work at all for developers to get their apps to at least run on the thing. And then, once we have physical access to them, then we can maybe worry about, making it good on the thing. Secondly, if we don't have physical access to them, neither do our customers. And so again, it's like there's only going to be so much we can really do until this thing is out in the market, or at least widely available to developers. So that's going to hold back some of that. So I would also hope that there is some nice to haves on the other platforms. This is what we're going to get to in a second. And I think based on the rumors and everything so far, that seems fairly plausible. And also just based on what Apple has done, even when their teams have been busy doing other stuff, on new platforms or whatever, they do tend to have decent iOS releases. Mac OS oftentimes, is last priority and doesn't get much. and frankly, that's often a good thing, because when they touch Mac OS without a ton of effort behind it, they tend to break things and make them worse. So, it's good for Mac OS to not have a lot of updates when they're busy. But iOS, I think, is likely to have some decent quality of life stuff there. That even if there isn't some kind of massive, SDK overhaul, some kind of massive new language or framework or anything else, like even in the absence of those really big updates, there tends to be a bunch of nice small stuff with new iOS upgrades, both as customer-facing features and on the developer SDK end. A lot of little like quality of life improvements, little new APIs, little single little modifiers for Swift UI, or hey, here's a new view container that makes things easier for you. Stuff like that. That tends to get there in every release. So I'm expecting that for iOS. And then I think what we're about to get to is I'm actually very excited and interested to hear that there's pretty strong rumors that watchOS is getting substantial updates. So do we want to talk about that now?
So this is reported in Bloomberg. What was this, last month, I believe, in late April? I believe it was a Mark Gurman piece that talked about how Apple is to upgrade its watch operating system with a new focus on widgets. And so Mark writes, as part of watchOS 10, Apple is planning to bring back widgets and make them a central part of the interface. The new widget system on the Apple Watch will be a combination of the old watchOS Glances system and the style of widgets that were introduced in iOS 14 on the iPhone. The plan is to let users scroll through a series of different widgets for activity tracking, weather, stock, tickers, calendar appointments, and more, rather than having them launch apps. The new interface will be reminiscent of the Siri watch face, which was introduced in watchOS 4, but it will be available as an overlay for any watch face. It's also similar to Widget Stacks, a feature in iOS and iPadOS that lets users pile many widgets into one and scroll through them. As part of the overhaul, Apple is testing the idea of changing the functions of some of the watch's buttons. Currently, a press the digital crown launches the home screen. For the next version of watchOS, Apple may have that open up widgets instead. And it is worth noting that apparently the Watch App Store has fewer than 1 million monthly users in the whatever region they were going to through some court proceedings. Apple disclosed versus 101 million on the iPhone. So literally 100 times more people using the iOS App Store than the watchOS App Store. I can't say I'm surprised, but yeah, I mean, I think the idea of widgets on the watch is appealing. It's not. I don't know if I'm quite as enthusiastic as you are, Marco, but I will say that even as someone who has only dabbled in watch development, one of the things that makes watch development very tough, particularly for things like complications, is that you have extraordinarily little time as a developer to run code that will update information on a complication and other things like that. And so if widgets were given more flexibility and more time to update themselves, such that they're getting updated more than what feels like 3 times a day. I know that's not literally the case, but that's what it feels like sometimes. That I would be more enthusiastic about. Like when I look down at my Carrot Weather widget, and it's not, complication, and it's not Carrot's fault. Oftentimes it is clearly behind, especially on spring or fall days where, the temperature can vary pretty dramatically from morning to afternoon. A lot of times I'll look in my watch will say, oh, it's, like 40 degrees outside, but I can tell it's easily, 20 degrees more than that. And so I think what I'm most potentially interested in is if there is either, a better API, which presumably there would be, and I'm going to give you a chance here, Marco, in a second, but a better API to make this work a little better or be easier to do on the developer side, but more importantly, just to have a little bit of more ability to make the watch feel alive rather than something that occasionally wakes up and then goes immediately back to sleep again. I don't know, Marco, does any of that make sense?
Yes, and I think you've identified a couple of of the key parts of both why I'm excited for this and also why some of the issues I've had with WatchOS in the past and present. So Apple has a long history going back to, I believe, the first major version of this that we saw in modern day was Dashboard for macOS. A long history of these views that you can get where you have to go to the view or you look at a view of something, and at that point when you're looking at it, the app is asked, hey, update this data. And in the meantime, maybe it shows a placeholder or stale data, and then the new data pops in a second or two later. And from a user point of view, that sucks. It's terrible. When you look at something on your watch or in the old dashboard interface on the Mac or different places like that, or the old Today screen or the Today widgets on iOS, you would seek out this information, you would go to it or you would look at it, and then at that point the system would ask the app, oh, hey, update this. And the reason why it was built that way was that these systems, for various reasons over time, there weren't the system resources, or they were chosen not to be spent this way, to have those apps constantly running in the background, being able to update their data whenever they wanted. In the case on the watch has always been extremely power constrained, and that dictates everything about it. It's a very small battery and a very small device, and they really can't make the battery any bigger. It's already most of the device, so it's you got to deal with what you got here, and that dictates everything. That dictates the slow processor that the watch has relative to the phone, and everything is about space and power and minimizing drain on that battery.
Speaking of that, there are rumors that they're going to actually change the SoC, not just change the number on it, but
finally
actually change what. And I don't see the rumors around 3 nanometer are really confusing because I know TSMC is ramping up on 3 nanometer, but the lead times are such that I can't figure out when Apple will ship a product fabbed on TSMC's 3 nanometer process. But I also can't imagine the watch SoC being substantially better without going to a new process. The problem, I don't know what the current process is. And is it actually the same process size as the good 5 nanometer that the phones are, or is it?
It might still be 7. I mean, because the watch SoC, the CPU in the watch, I don't know about the whole SoC. Mm-hmm. The CPU cores in the watch have not changed in 3 years.
I think the whole SoC hasn't changed. I think people who have looked at the die shots that not much has changed in it for a long time.
Yeah, so it's using a 3-year-old processor, and so that's not fun. Yeah, I think the Series 6, 7, and 8, they're all the same chip. So
the rumor is this might be a new chip, and I think if it uses a smaller process size than the previous one, that could give Apple a little bit of headroom to change some of the things you just described.
Yes, because that's the thing. With WatchOS since its beginning, it was all about conserving, extremely aggressively conserving the resources on the watch because there's not much to go around. So that impacts the way apps have been built from the beginning in various ways. But the gist of it is what Casey said, that your app, you don't always run. If you're not being actively used on screen, with very few exceptions, you're not running. And so if you rely on a third-party app that has, say, a complication that you're looking at, say, Carrot Weather, a good weather app, you're looking at whatever the complication is on the screen, that app is only being woken up in the background every so often to fetch new data from the internet, update the data in the app, and update the complication data, and it tells the watch, hey, over these next 6 hours, here's the hourly forecasted display. From this time to this time, show this. From this time to this time, show this, etc. It gives us this timeline of updates, and during that entire time, the watch may not and probably won't ever ask the app, hey, refresh, give me new data here. So what you're looking at when you look at watch complications, you are looking at a timeline of pre-rendered data that the app has provided during some 3-second long window it was allowed to run in the background a few hours ago, possibly. And there's a certain limit on how many times per day it can do that. The app's servers can send push notifications to request an update, but those aren't always obeyed. It's a request, not a guarantee. Please give me some time. I have some new stuff. I would like to show it. And the watch can say okay, or the watch can say, I don't know what you're talking about, and just walk away. And so there's all these limitations, and the widget system on the iPhone was built the same way. If you were making watch complications, a couple of years ago, then when WidgetKit came out, it was like, oh, this is ClockKit, just slightly different, and with SwiftUI, which made it a lot better. But that idea of when you view a widget on the iPhone, that app is not running. And this is why, again, there's also some rumors with iOS 17 of possible interactive widgets, and this kind of flies in the face of this because it's kind of questioning well, what would that mean? And I think it would be very limited if that is a thing. But anyway, because again, widgets on iOS work that same way, and then they later then brought that widget system back to the watch and replaced ClockKit, which was based on WidgetKit was based on the ideas of ClockKit, but did it better with SwiftUI. Then they redid the new complication system using WidgetKit because it was better. Anyway, so they brought it back full circle. Anyway, so on iOS, you have widgets. Those apps aren't running. It's the same thing where they are periodically asked for updates, and the app gives iOS a timeline to say, all right, show this from this time to this time, etc. And again, same thing applies. That app servers can send a push notification requesting an update. It may or may not be obeyed. There's limits, there's throttling, etc. On iOS, there's one set of limits. On the watch, it's way more aggressively throttled, and there's way less opportunity for apps to update their complications on the watch. So anything they do, first of all, it makes perfect sense to bring that system more to the watch because it does what the watch needs. It gives a timeline of updates without having to have all these apps running in the background, draining the very, very tiny battery in the Apple Watch. So it makes sense to have this be more built into the system. That being said, if there's no other major advances like more frequent background updates, a more robust system to request updates, higher limits on how much CPU time or memory those processes or extensions can use when they're updating, without other changes like that, it's going to be a fairly limited system. And it's not going to enable a lot of what people would expect or want. So I hope when they bring this over, assuming they have done, I'm sure it's too late now, whatever they've decided to do, that's it. But I hope they have, when they have presumably brought this over, I hope it has come with some increases in those limits, or some, less aggressive throttling, some more frequent updates being permitted, or something. And all of that, I think, will be a great thing once they establish it, because when you look at the way the watch works now, apps on the watch still suck. They just suck less than they used to. Way less. They used to be horrendous. With WatchKit 1, that was rough. But they're still very limited. They're still way more limited than iOS apps, and it makes it very hard as a developer to make a great watch app experience that will match what our users expect. As a result, it's kind of unfair. I don't use a third-party weather widget as a complication on my watch, because third-party apps, even the best written ones, like Carrot, Carrot's a great app.
It is.
Even the best written weather apps on the Apple Watch cannot update their complications as often or as reliably as Apple lets theirs update. So I use Apple weather complications on my watch, even though they're less good, because they work better and more consistently. And that's not to say anything against the developer of other apps. They can't do anything about it. It's out of their hands. And I know this because I have my own custom little complications that don't do anything useful, but I just kind of use them for cosmetic, things on my own face. And I know that occasionally they just stop getting asked to update, and I can't do anything about it. So the whole system is pretty, it's pretty limiting for third-party developers. So what I'm hoping, if they're moving this to the system from a developer point of view, I hope those limits get raised in a big way. And maybe that'll need the new processor, maybe not. I hope not, because I would like them to be available on all the existing install base, but hey, we'll see what happens. And then as a user of watchOS, the honeycomb screen has always been a huge failure. Anytime you have to go to that screen, you've lost. And going to that screen, it's like trying to plug in a micro USB cable. It's like, I know I'm going to spend way too long staring at these tiny icons trying to find the app that I want, and whatever I tap on, whatever I guess, is this alarm or timer? Whatever I guess is going to be wrong the first time and maybe the second. And so that screen is terrible. You can change it to a list if you want by a long pressing, but the list is terrible in different ways. First of all, it's just too long. There's all these different built-in features, many of which you can't turn off, that you need some way to access. So that whole system could use a rethink. It's a hard problem. I get, they're trying to cram 40 apps onto a 2-inch screen. That's a tough problem. But there is room for improvement in the way they've done it now. So if the rumor is correct that they are actually re-implement or rethinking large parts of how users interact with apps on the watch at all, that's a very good thing too. And then finally, I would say the rate of adoption of third-party apps among non-nerd people on the watch is really low. And I mean, this is just anecdotal, but look around people in your life who have Apple Watches. We've talked about that on the show before. How many of them even know that you can change the complications? Ask around, look around, see how many people in your life use an Apple Watch face that even has complications, and then see how many of those are on the defaults. And it's a lot. It's most of them. So the watch has a lot of functionality that people just don't know about. And you can't blame them, because the way to access this functionality is often really hidden or convoluted.
Or on the phone.
Yeah, or on the phone, which, I mean, fortunately, they have been moving a lot of that off. I recently tried to edit what metrics were shown in different workout modes, and that used to be phone only, and now it's watch only. Now you have to hit the little dot menu on the workout and go in there and edit stuff there. It took me a while to figure out. First I was looking all over the phone app for it, couldn't find it anywhere there. I'm like, well, crap, did they just remove customization of workout faces? And then eventually I found it in the watch app, but it took me a while. And that was I know this feature is probably still here somewhere, and I know roughly where to look at it, and I'm a computer professional. And it took me a long time to figure it out. So there's a lot of stuff like that on the watch. There's a lot of functionality on the watch, much of which people would really enjoy if they knew it was there or if they knew how to do it. And it has a massive discoverability problem, and a lot of stuff is super clunky about it once you do figure it out. So there's a lot of room for improvement there. I'm really excited that they're tackling this, because for most of the last 3 to 5 years, it has seemed like the watch is not well staffed. It has seemed like when WWDC comes and goes every year for the watch, it has seemed a lot like, man, do they have more than 4 people working on this entire OS? Because they do good work, but it's just really bits and pieces come out every year. It's not a lot comes out from watchOS every year. It's kind of like tvOS. You get a couple of things here and there, but it's a very, very small set of new features every year. And so it has seemed underinvested in the last X years. This suggests that they have actually put a lot of effort into it this year. So that's exciting to me as well. I'm really looking forward to, hopefully, the watch having major updates in usability or in app capabilities or app structure or whatever it is. I hope they actually deliver on that. I hope it's really good. And I would also hope, still, maybe, the more you put a widget-like architecture into the watch, I think the easier that makes it for them to offer third-party watch faces as an option.
Yeah.
Now,
Okay.
whether I know,
happen eventually.
whether
Mark my words.
whether they are doing it, whether they will choose to do it, whether they will permit it, these are all very different questions. But from a technical point of view, using WidgetKit or a WidgetKit-like system with some pre-built parts makes a lot of sense for enabling for the structure to enable third-party watch faces, because then you don't have to have the third-party process running constantly on the watch. You can, again, just wake it up periodically. You can define certain pieces that you have to use. Like, all right, well, you have to use this digital face of this size, and it has to be in this location. Or you can choose to use these specific analog watch hands, and they have to be in this location. Whatever it is, if they wanted to dictate certain parts of it and certain requirements, say all watch faces must be able to do X, Y, Z, or must use pieces X, Y, Z in this way, they could do that really well with WidgetKit, technically speaking, and practically speaking. So it seems like the most apparent and obvious way to enable third-party watch faces based on the tech stack we know of today is with WidgetKit. So bringing WidgetKit to watchOS in a bigger way, yeah, that makes a lot of sense for maybe enabling this either now or in the future. I hope it's now. If it isn't now, and I know it probably isn't, I hope it's in the near future, because I still want third-party watch faces. And this is just such a clear, like, I wouldn't necessarily call anything easy, but this is such a straightforward and dare I say obvious way to offer them, using this kind of architecture. So anyway, I'm looking forward to this, and I hope this is an exciting year for watchOS.
So imagine this: it's WWDC. We're watching the video. Since it's a fantasy, we're all sitting next to each other for the first time since 2019. We're watching the video together, and Kevin Lynch comes on the video and says, "I only have one thing to tell you about the watch. Communication between the watch and the phone is reliable now," and then walks away.
That's not going to happen.
Is that enough? It'll never happen. But no. Marco, is that enough to make this a classic, just favorite WWDC of all time?
Oh no, because first of all, I don't think it's possible. Second of all, I wouldn't believe them.
Well,
and
that's right.
I think the way to fix phone to watch communication is to get rid of it. Like the way to fix it is to give me the same controls that I have on URL background download sessions and URL communication, which you have most of it already. Give me the same background download abilities and APIs on the watch that I have on the phone. Let it download, let background downloads start immediately, and let them run over Wi-Fi and not over Bluetooth to the phone. That's what There's a number of points in that communication stack that are either unreliable or ungodly slow. And again, this is all in the name of saving power. You can see why they did it, but I think a lot of those decisions, they might have made sense 7 years ago. Maybe they make less sense now, or maybe they're not as necessary now as they used to be. And those decisions really hold back apps. And so again, I hope they just let my app initiate a backgroundable download that will run over Wi-Fi and start immediately. That's it. I can do it on iOS. I can do it on all other Apple OSs. I don't think macOS supports background downloads. Anyway, I can do it on most other Apple OSs. I can't do it on the watch, and that really holds stuff back. To the point where I had to make a breakout game in my app so that you would keep the screen on. That. The whole reason I had to make a game in my watch app, in my podcast app, while you download a file, is so that you have something to do that will keep the screen on, so I don't have to rely on the background downloads when you want to download something right now before you go out for a run or something, and you don't want it to be canceled for no reason or to never start for no reason. So please, Apple, make that stuff better. But anyway, I will complain a lot less about that if I have custom third-party watch faces.
No, that's fair. So, John, pulling on this thread a moment, what is your, I don't care about anything else that happened, this was a great WWDC, I assume new Mac Pro?
Yeah, although I'm not really expecting that because of the rumors. Although I do have a brief aside about something that Marco talked about, how people don't customize their complications on their watch because they don't know they can do it, and the interface of doing it is clunky, and there's lots of things on the watch are non-discoverable. And when you were describing that, I thought this is another place where it seems like Apple is, we don't know because we don't know what they're doing, but it seems like they're behind where everyone else is zooming forward with their large language models. One of the things that current large language models that are out there right now are really good at doing is exactly this task, which is a voice interface to describing what you want the complications in your phone screen to be like. You can go to one of these large language models right now and say, make me a web page. In the lower left corner, put a picture of a sun. And in the lower right corner, put a counter that counts up every second. And like, you could actually describe the functionality of the widgets and it will do it. Like, how easy would it be for a well-trained large language model to say, I want the weather in the upper left, the date in the lower left, and then to continue a conversation, said, no, I want the date to be the day of the week plus the month and the year, or I don't want the year. Like, those type of conversations, you can have them with large language models right now. And the canvas that they're painting on is like anything you can ask for, more or less. It'll try to do it with varying degrees. The problem space of picking which widgets you want to, picking from a fixed set of widgets to appear in a fixed set of location with a fixed set of options, large language models would eat that for breakfast. The problems are, one, Apple seems not to be on that train with everyone else, as far as we know, because they haven't announced anything in that area. Two, their existing thing that you can talk to, Siri, sucks balls, and we know that. And then, three, I don't think this is the type of thing that Apple can, say, oh, well, they're popular. We'll roll it out this year. Like, it's hard to know because we don't know what's going on, but like, it seems like Apple is behind everyone else on this. So you can't expect them to, surprise, watchOS 10 is out, and it's got a large language model that you can talk to. Oh, and I guess this ties into what Marco was saying too, is even if you could, like, you don't run the large language model on the watch, right? So now it has to do network communication. Oh no, the sky is falling, batteries being destroyed. And I get that. Like it's true of what Marco was asking for. I want my download to start now and on Wi-Fi. It'll kill people's watch batteries. But it's like, but they want that to happen when they're down. It's the balance between which would you rather have? Your podcast literally never downloads and it frustrates you to no end, or we burn part of your battery downloading your podcast. Like, you have to pick one. You can't, there's no way to get the podcast on your watch without burning battery. So either you want it and you're willing to sacrifice the battery for it, and you don't. And the same deal, I think, with talking to your watch and setting up with a large language model and setting up your complications. Maybe as a one-time tutorial that you guide people through when they're setting up their watch and they have a conversation with it, and during the course of the conversation, the watch face forms in front of their eyes, is a great way to A, show people that that's possible, and B, let them know that they can do it in a way that doesn't involve them poking their fingers at the screen trying to find the interface. Because I have the same frustration. I'm not familiar with watchOS because I don't wear an Apple Watch. And anytime I want to do anything in watchOS, I don't know where it is. I don't know how it works. I can't figure out what things I'm supposed to be touching, or even what the vocabulary of gestures is to do stuff. Large language models would destroy this task. They're so good at it. It's such a narrow problem space, and you can talk in a free-form manner. And Apple's speech to text actually works pretty well. So once you get over that hurdle and you can throw that text to a large language model running somewhere on an Apple server that it can communicate with, that is, I think, a really good use of current technology for, talking to things, and the problem space of dealing with any kind of UI on a 2-inch screen that's on your wrist.
Yeah, and on the point of large language models, by the way, this is obviously a huge question. Is like, we're in this boom time of this new generation of AI capabilities. What's Apple going to do at WWDC with them? And I think, unfortunately, the answer is probably nothing.
The answer is nothing.
Because that's not what Apple does. Like, Apple does stuff, more slowly than that in a lot of areas. And
I mean, they could, if they were on the ball on this and were sort of ahead of the curve, or even with everyone else, they could have stuff to announce at WWDC. But that whole part of the org seems dysfunctional now. Again, because we don't know what's going on. For all we know, they've been working on large language model stuff for 7 years, and they're about to roll it out and wow us. But it certainly seems like that's not the case.
No, I think what's more likely is, look, Apple knows that, again, these are smart people. They know that the eyes of the world are going to be upon them and expecting AI announcements. And so I think what they're going to most likely do is brand some things as AI that are not actually using this new generation of technique, and it's just using the previous generation, what we used to call machine learning. These terms, and I know these terms are oftentimes vague and shifting around over time, but I think they might just show off stuff that is using that kind of technique and say this is AI powered, just because those are the buzzwords that people expect of the day.
Yeah, the rumors surrounding the Siri and the headset, I seem to recall reading something somewhere that was a supposedly inside dirt on the headset team didn't really want to use Siri, but that's what's available to them. They kind of wanted to go their own direction because Siri sucks so bad. They just I don't know if they wanted to use large language models. Maybe that predates that, but they know they have a problem here because the headset is similar. Like the interface to it is more limited than it is on a phone, iPad, or Mac. So you have to figure out, how do I manipulate things? I know the whole camera's looking at your fingertips and so on and so forth, but it's a harder problem, right? It's harder than just using a pointer or cursor, or touching the screen with your fingers. You can't do that with a headset. So let's use the voice assistant that our company already has. Oh, but that voice assistant is bad.
So bad.
Well, you don't want the headset to be bad. People working on the headset have said, we want the headset to be good, and we do need something that's going to listen to us. And so I kind of agree that they're like, as they promote Siri and the headset, maybe they'll have a new suffix, Siri AI, Siri. I mean, I don't know how they'll go that far, but like, maybe they'll just say, hey, Siri's in your headset too, and everybody loves Siri, and look how amazing it is. You can talk to it and make little VR apps, as the rumor was, or whatever. But like, this is another one of the benefits of the headset. The fact that it blots out the sun, I think it can blot out the fact that Apple doesn't really have anything to show for it regarding large language models at WWDC, which is fine. They got a whole headset and a new platform. Isn't that exciting? I think they can get away with it this year. Next year, when we come to WWDC next year, regardless of how the headset turns out, maybe next year it's finally just shipping to people or something. Next year, Apple needs to start having some kind of answers with large language models, because I think they've proven they're useful in enough contexts. And like the reason I gave the, setting up the complications on your watch screen problem space, that is a limited domain where large language models can excel in ways that Siri absolutely has not, because you have to know how to talk to Siri in the special way that Siri understands. And even when sometimes it does ridiculous things that don't make any sense, whereas large language models don't work that way. Again, if you've never tried one, go to one right now and ask it to do something with a limited problem domain, or even with a not particularly limited one. Like I said, asking it to make a web page for you or something. It's really good about having a conversation with you and understanding what it is you want, as long as you're talking to it about something that it was able to train itself on that's out there in the world. And Apple can absolutely find a large language model and train it on enough data to understand watchOS complications.
Yeah. One thing, by the way, like in terms of like WWDC, hopes and dreams here, one thing I would love to see, I don't know if it'll be this year, it'll more likely be next year, but I would love to see Apple make available to developers through APIs on the phone some large language model capabilities that they have optimized like crazy to run on their hardware. So, for instance, the Stable Diffusion algorithm for image generation, Apple actually, I believe it was that one, Apple actually contributed to the open source project or whatever to optimize it for running on Apple Silicon Macs or Apple Silicon in general. And so, then that kind of enabled people to make iPhone apps with it. I would love them to do more of that kind of thing, of like, and build it into the OS so that we don't have to download like each app. Because a good example of this right now is if you want to transcribe sound into speech, into text. Apple has actually shipped an API to do this for a number of years now. It's called something like SF Speech Synthesizer, or Speech Recognizer, whatever. There were a number of problems with it. Number one, because I've been trying to do features like this in Overcast for years. One of the biggest, clearest examples of where I could use this is like when you do clip sharing in Overcast to be able to show as part of the video clip the text. Many apps like TikTok, they do this. They have this built in now. This is a common thing, and I need to do it at some point. And in the past, this was limited by a number of factors. Number one was in the past, I don't know if this is still the case, that API, to use Apple's built-in speech-to-text API, your app had to request and get access to the microphone, even if you were feeding it audio that was not from the microphone. So I could not, as a podcast app, feed the pre-recorded audio that I downloaded to my podcast app through their text-to-speech system or their speech-to-text system until I prompted the user for microphone access. And that alone was enough for me to say, I'm not using this feature. Because I'm not going to ask my users, who are all, educated nerds, for permission to access their microphone in a podcast app, because there's no reason I would need that except to be creepy and like spy on them with ads and stuff. So I don't even want the appearance that I might be doing that. I don't even want the ability to access their microphone. I don't even want that to be possible in my app. So that alone ruled it out. But also, it was using older style, models and things to do the speech to text conversion, and it wasn't very good in my testing. Like I made a couple of test prototypes, granted myself microphone access just to see how good is this, and it was bad, and it was too bad to ship, so I didn't ship it. Well, however many months ago, OpenAI released their Whisper model, and Whisper is really massively better. It's not a small difference. It is way more accurate. And there is a project called Whisper.cpp where some guy has done amazing work in like transforming this thing that you would otherwise need a whole bunch of Python to run into a very simple C++ wrapper that you could make iOS and other apps with, and it runs fine on Apple stuff. And I tried that, and I built a prototype with that, and it was super easy to use. And the downside of using Whisper, there's two main downsides. Number one, if you use the large models that have like larger vocabularies and more accuracy, it's just too slow to run on an iPhone. Number two, these models are huge to download. Like the base model that provides like okay accuracy, decent speed is something, I think it's something like 70 megs. And then if you want something more accurate, it goes into like multiple gigs very quickly. And this is just, it's untenable to run that. The way I would want to run that would be, stuff like transcription of what you're listening to. There's lots of things I could do with that if it was fast and inexpensive computationally to run that. But if I had to download like a 2 gig model, as part of the app to do those features or whatever, that's not going to fly. And if it's going to be super slow, it's not going to fly. Well, they could build in some medium-sized model into the OS if they wanted to, and they could use it themselves for their own speech-to-text stuff and then make that available to developers. They could also, for instance, optimize that model. The reason why the Whisper.cpp doesn't run very quickly on iPhones, one of the reasons is because Apple has not done their work to optimize that one the way they did with the Stable Diffusion. Also, the way these models usually work, if you're running in the background, you don't have access to the GPU. Or the neural engine, as far as I know, but you definitely can't run ML models on the GPU if your app is in the background. You can it makes your app only use CPU based computation, and that makes them way slower to run in many cases. And this is the case for Whisper. And Whisper.cpp only ever uses the CPU. It doesn't have any access to the hardware acceleration besides CPU raw stuff. And so this makes it slower than it could be. So if Apple actually wanted to offer a really great dictation to speech API or speech to text API, they could massively improve the API they've already offered for years by using this new kind of technique, a new kind of model like this, optimize it, let it run on the acceleration hardware, ship a base model with the OS, and all of a sudden every app could have really easy access to speech to text. That's the kind of thing that I think is more likely for Apple to offer with these new AI techniques sooner than having them offer some kind of like full-blown customer-facing, quote, AI-powered feature. I think it's too soon for that, and that's kind of less Apple-y to do that kind of thing.
The customizing watch face is a great example of how Apple would do it. It's not like you can have arbitrary conversations with the thing. Like they would be very narrowly constrained. And I know the large language models out there now are supposedly constrained, but it's more like everything except for these 5 or 6 things they try to keep them away from, whereas this would be, you can discuss nothing except for watch faces. And I feel like that is easier, especially if they train the model themselves, right? Which, again, costs money. Regarding the speech text thing and the size of them and everything, there's a reason large language models are called large language models. They use tremendous amounts of storage and tremendous amounts of memory and tremendous amounts of compute. Not just for the training, which is itself huge, because obviously you're grinding through tons and tons of data, but even just for the part of it where it runs, the inference part of it where it does its thing, even that takes a substantial amount of power and resources, which is why I was saying the watch would have to be communicating with the server, obviously, and then even just communicating with the server would be taxing for the watch and drain the battery and so on. But
not to mention the servers.
Yeah, well, I mean, the servers, yeah. But again, to be that incredibly constrained to just be doing watch faces, it's what we talked about a while ago, and the people have actually implemented. Large language models sitting in front of essentially the functionality exposed by Siri, or like limit functionality that's already on the watch. The watch can already pick complications and configure them and put them in places on the faces. It's just a question of translating from speech to text and from text to what is this text telling me to do, and then, the watch, have APIs for doing all the things you're asking for. It's a very constrained problem space, which is miles from like what Microsoft did was like, here's Bing, you can talk to it about stuff. Good luck.
Yeah, but like ultimately, what I want to see from Apple in the AI age really is make a lot of this cool tech available on device for on-device use by apps that are not communicating with their own servers, that can just run everything locally. And Apple has, with the exception of having what seems like organizational or cultural trouble with AI machine learning techniques and people in general. That's a large issue they need to figure out if they haven't yet. And so far it seems like they haven't. But what they have resource-wise is they have all these supercomputers in everybody's pockets that have amazing hardware and software capabilities. And they care a lot about privacy and things running on device whenever possible and everything. And that's a level of sophistication and an amount of resources that their competitors don't have. So I hope Apple leans into that, and I think this is how they're going to ultimately tackle, quote AI, leaning into on-device stuff as much as possible. And if they do that themselves, they will most likely do it in a way where there is an API for developers to hook into or use those same capabilities in our apps. That's what I'm hoping to see from Apple in this new age of these new styles of AI. It is, cool on-device capabilities that run quickly and locally, that don't need, us to, as, a developer of one app, we don't need to go train our own models. We don't need to, go run a huge server farm or have our own, OpenAI tokens that we have to use and figure out how the heck to pay for. Like, I want to see what Apple can deliver us on device that they will maintain, they will train, they will update it over time, they will make it faster over time, and let us build on top of it. And they have a very strong history of doing that in other areas. So I think this is what they will ultimately do whenever they get their act together on AI. And we don't know when that will be, and it probably won't be all at once. I'm hoping to see little hints of it this year. Even that I think is optimistic, but we'll see. And then maybe next year or the year after, maybe we'll see big stuff. And that'll be exciting.
They're already doing all of that. It's just a question of what letters they put on it. They used to put the letters M and L in front of
Right.
it, and now we're saying the letters A and I. What we mean is exactly what Apple has been doing, which is they do provide you a bunch of models that you can use, like that text-to-speech one that you were saying.
Yeah.
And they do improve it over years. And they do make it run fast in the hardware. They've done all of that. But like, yeah, but the stuff that you have now, there's better stuff, Apple, that uses not the M and the L, but it uses the A and the I, and it's all this, right? we obviously, there are different techniques to doing this, and the current technique that lots of other companies are experimenting with is better than what Apple is doing. So what we want is, Apple, do what you've been doing with all the things you used to call ML. Keep doing that. We love frameworks. We love you making it fast on your hardware. It's just that there's a new thing that does everything that you've been trying to do, but better. Or not everything, but certain things it does better. So please give us access to that in a way that makes us not have to worry about it. And I do think that they will do that. And I just got done saying the large language models are too big. They're just way too big to even run at all. And even like phones or even Big Macs sometimes. That's why you have to communicate over the network. But that's today. Like, those things change. Like, part of what makes that tractable is just the march of progress. But part of it is also companies like Apple deciding that it is important for their SoCs to be good at doing this. And that can really knock down these things. It's the reason the SoCs we have today are so good at doing the things they do, so good at image processing, so good at, doing the kinds of computations that has to be done on a phone, on a Mac or whatever. Those special processors for video encoding and decoding and, the neural engine, all that stuff was developed because Apple said these types of functions are useful to do on a phone or on a Mac or whatever, and we want to do them in low power or whatever. I think that will come for large language models as well. I don't think we're going to, models that currently run that require hundreds of gigs of RAM to do inference are going to run on your phone anytime soon. But I think there will be a meeting in the middle of, like you were saying, Marco, cut down versions of these things, limited problem space. And to be clear, with the limited problem space, you're like, oh, there's no way they can never limit a large language model enough. It'll always be scary. I'm thinking of the scenario when you were talking about configuring the complications. It never answers back. The only thing it does in response to you talking to it is show you what it thinks you're asking for as you're screening your complications, and basically says, is this okay? press OK or say OK, or like it never talks back to you. It just does what you, and there's no way for you to accidentally have your watch insult you or something, or there's very few ways for have your watch insult you by arranging complications. I guess each complication was a letter, it could spell out a naughty word or something, and someone would figure out how to do it. But like, it's really limited problem space. But basically what we're just asking for is, the promise of Siri? Well, large language models are currently delivering on a lot of that promise. I can have a conversation in text with a large language model and get it to do useful things that reflect what I'm asking it. No, it doesn't know anything about facts. No, it has no understanding of anything. No, I can't ask it questions and trust its answers. But I can ask it to arrange a bunch of complications on a watch screen. And the good thing about that is I'm the one who gets to say, you did it correctly or you didn't. And if you didn't, I could say, no, the upper left should be carrot weather and not Apple's weather widget. And maybe it still fails to understand me or whatever, but the result is, okay, well, fine, I'll do that one manually or whatever. But the point is, like, trying to do that through Siri now is laughable. Like, you can't get, people would never try to do that. They're lucky when they can talk to their watch to reply to a text or something, and that's only like nerds who have practiced that whole thing. Whereas large language models seem so much more flexible about understanding the foibles of our language and eventually doing what we want. And so I really do hope that, again, not this year probably, but that eventually becomes one of the things they start rolling out, if not as a way to interface with tiny screens or headsets, then at least as something that we can expect our powerful Macs to be able to do, right? Because I would love to be able to say things to my Mac to do drudgery without having to open up a web browser, go to one of these large language models, type a bunch of stuff in and all that.
Thanks to our sponsors this week, Kolide, Squarespace, and Trade Coffee. And thanks to our members who support us directly. You can join us at atp.fm/join. You get that awesome new pizza special and everything we've ever done before that, plus all the other membership perks. You'll see. atp.fm/join. Thank you, everybody. We will talk to you next week.
Now the show is over. They didn't even mean to begin, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research. Marco and Casey wouldn't let him, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Twitter, you can follow them at CASEYLISS. So that's Casey Liss, MARCOARMENT, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA Syracuse. It's accidental. They didn't mean to. Accidental. Tech podcast so long.
All right, so I wanted to talk to the two of you. I wanted to kind of invoke the brain trust, perhaps call the Diamond Dogs together, and see what you two thought about pricing for Callsheet. We talked about this, I don't know when it was. Maybe I think it was a little bit last week. I think it was a little bit a few weeks before that. But I'm getting, knock on wood, getting really close to sending this to the App Store, which means I really need to lock down my pricing schedule, for lack of a better word.
Well, hold on. You need to lock down your initial pricing.
Sure.
You can always change it.
Yes, that is true. And so I think what I've landed on as a general scheme, and then we'll talk about the different options therein. I think what I'm going to do is you get to use the main screen, which shows you like popular stuff in your country, or really your language, popular stuff in your language, new stuff in your language. So that would generally be, new stuff in English for me and popular things in English. And it's sort of kind of American based when it's English, but not always. It's complicated. It doesn't matter. But anyways, you can do all that. You can tap through that whenever you want. And there's no real limit there. So hypothetically, if you can 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon yourself to the information you want, that'll take a while, but you can do that for free always. But to search, I think I'm going to have a daily limit of something to the order of 5, maybe 10 searches at most.
That's so many. What do you do?
That's too many.
Is it? Okay.
Have all right, one or two. Like that.
Okay, well, hold on. Let's shelve that for a second. Put it in the parking lot. We'll come back to that. Because that is something I want to discuss. I didn't realize that was too many. So I want to discuss that, but hold on a second. So some number of searches per day. And then after that, it's tough noogies. Subscribe or get out of here, wait until tomorrow. And I feel like in general, that is the right approach. And that's what I think I want to go with. But if you disagree, either of you, we can talk about that in a second. Then the second question becomes, assuming we have this some amount of free searches per day, and then you have to subscribe. All right, well, what does subscribing mean? And I think when we first talked about this, we had concluded kind of as a threesome that somewhere to the order of $8 a year seems like a reasonable price for this sort of thing. And I think I feel pretty good about that. But there's two other options on the table that I think would be additive, not a replacement. One of them is, do I offer a monthly option? And if so, how expensive is that? And currently I'm leaning toward offering a monthly option for either $1 or $1.50. I'm not really sure what feels right there. Now that would be kind of considerably more than the yearly option. So I want to know your thoughts when we get there, when I stop talking in just a second. But I think for sure I want a yearly option. The question is, do I do a monthly option? And if so, how much? And then the other question is, do I do something like a lifetime unlock? I think using the word lifetime is a dire mistake, and I wouldn't phrase it that way, but maybe a one-time unlock if I go this route at all. And I think I'm against it because I just think that it sets me up for failure. And even if I'm leaving a little money on the table, it makes me nervous promising anything that far out. Like that just makes me feel a little uncomfortable. So that's kind of where things sit right now. And I am curious what your thoughts are. Now, Marco, you jumped all over me justifiably. I'm not upset. You jumped all over me a second ago, well, both of you really, about 5 free searches per day. So talk me down from 5. What should the number be, Marco?
I'd say 1 or 2.
That's tricky though.
It is. Look, again, it's tricky, but and there's a question of like, what defines a search? That's a big question. If you search and you mistype it and get no results, does that count as a search?
Yeah, so the way it's currently implemented, it's not in the test flight yet, but the way it's currently implemented in a branch that I have going right now is that you can, strictly speaking, type however many searches as you want during the day, but the moment you the moment you tap on a result, then that counts as a search, and now you've lost one of your searches.
Yes, that sounds good. I would also, the branding of this, I would say, you call it something like free searches. So like you have 1 free search left today, and then when you hit the end, you've used all your free searches today. You can buy the subscription and get unlimited searches. That's how I would phrase this. You have free searches, and then you have this paywall that gets you more searches.
Well, speaking of free, you're doing a free trial, right?
Well, that was my initial thought, but now that I have this whole free search thing, I feel like it's kind of redundant.
Yeah, I don't know that you necessarily need a free. If you have this,
here's what you need. You need to have the goal is someone needs to use the app enough to like it, and that is the tricky part. So, use it enough to like it, like just a single use instance. Like I was watching one TV show and we had a question on the couch about what was this person in. That one instance of use I feel like that one instance of use has to be successful and enjoyable without any pay crap in their face. And you're like, okay, but how many searches is that? And that's why I think that the picking the searches is tricky. 10 is too many, right? Because no one's going to burn through 10 a day. 10 is enough for a single couch instance, and maybe you'd use the app once every few days. But 1 is too few, because for a single couch instance, like no one will ever get the point to like the app, because they'll be like, I used it for 2 seconds and then it threw a paywall in my face and I hate it. That's why the free trial is good, because the free trial period is unlimited, and that allows the free trial period to be, this is the time when you get to like the app, because it's unlimited. It's a free trial, everything's open, full access to everything, but that door closes, and that takes the pressure off your number of searches per day to allow people to get to like the app. They're supposed to get to like it during the free trial, and then the paywall sole purpose is to gently remind people that they can pay to get that experience that they previously had. If you don't do a free trial, you have to somehow thread the needle of like, how much will let people use it enough so they'll like it? But like, because I think some people will never go above 1 search per couch incident or whatever. Like they'll just use the app forever for free to say, I don't do this often. When I do it, I look it up. And again, what you just described, I can do as many searches as I want until I find the result that I want. And then I tap on it and I get my answer. And I put the phone down and never look at it again. They might not even know you have a paywall with your limit of 1. And other people, in a single couch incident to go through 75 searches because they're like, what was this person? What was that? Search for this person. I think the person's name was this. And they're tapping through results and they're doing all sorts of things. And they will be incredibly frustrated by a limit that's like 1 or 2. But if you have the free trial, you can be like, look, you had your salad days. You got to use the app. You got to see all the features. You got to, and then it's just a question of how long is the free trial. It would kind of be nice if the free trial only started like when they had their first big usage scenario. But yeah,
well,
I think
a free trial would hypothetically start upon subscribing. So you subscribe, you get your 1 week or whatever, and then you're charged. I don't know. I hear what you're saying. I don't disagree with it, but I feel like, especially if I were to crank the limit from 5 to like 2 or 3, then I don't, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like at that point you have gotten at least a vague enough notion to know, okay, no, this is all right. And if you want to try again tomorrow, try it again tomorrow. I don't love the idea of both a free trial and the search limit, but that is a weak opinion held loosely.
See, this is getting very complicated. Like I almost think like John's right. Like, you want to give people a chance to like the app,
of course.
So that's making me now revisit like, what if instead of having anything per unit of time, per day, per month, what if it was a higher limit that was single use? So, for instance, you get 10 free searches. After that, you got to pay. That's it. Like, because then you could make the number higher, and you can give people more chance to get to know the app. You could display it more easily in the UI. It's much clearer to people what the limit is.
Yeah, some people take a while to come around to pay for stuff, though. Like, some people need to be convinced that there is actual utility. They may like the app, and they may say, oh, I found that app useful, but they haven't come around to the idea that I like it enough to pay for it. And that's where the doling out a small amount periodically is better than the big bucket. Even if it was a big bucket of 100, once they burn through that 100 and they like the app, they may not be ready to pay still. But if there's one doled out each day after that, they'd be like, you know what, I do keep coming back to this. This is the same reason so many people, including me, eventually paid for the New York Times, because it's like they have a bunch of free ones, and I don't think I want to pay for the whole thing. But you know what? Over the course of months, weeks, years, you realize I'm more sick of running out of my free articles at the New Yorker or whatever than I am sick of paying for the New Yorker, and then eventually you do it. And obviously the numbers here are way smaller than the New Yorker or the New York Times subscription or anything like that. But it does take people time to come around. If you slam that door closed, you use your 150 free searches and that's it forever and ever and ever, you're giving up the opportunity for them to eventually come around because they're just going to delete the app.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, because it's tricky because like you don't want to make this too complicated. You want to keep it so that people know that there is a limit. They know when they're going to hit it. And then when they hit it, they don't say screw you and delete the app. And, so I get what you're saying, John. I mean, I just think once we get into you have X per day, they recharge per day, and then you can start a free trial that lasts X amount of time. Then you're paying me eventually after that. And by the way, you have an annual or a monthly. Like, that's a lot of complexity for this pricing model for a very simple app.
I mean, a lot of the apps I see on the App Store are exactly like that. Like I know I've been subjected to prompts and screens describing this exact scenario, and as a customer, I tend not to get hung up with understanding what it is that's saying. As a customer, all I know is, can I use the app when I want to? And if I can't, how much money would I have to pay to make it happen? And then the final thing is, will I be able to use the app in the future, or should I just delete it now? I don't actually understand or know or try to parse the text about what their scheme is and what the limits are and what the whatever. All I know is, I can't do what I want now. Why is that, and how can I make it go away? And is this a permanent situation? And I feel like that's how most people interact with this. Like, they don't have to actually understand your business model.
Well, but that's even more reason to me to say, look, it's either you pay or you don't. And this is what Marco was saying a moment ago. Like, if you don't want to pay, I'll give you a little sip.
You can just make it a paid upfront app like an old person.
Well, yeah. I mean, but if you don't pay, I'll give you a little sip of it each day. And if you pay, then that's that. And then we're good here. As long as you keep paying, you get as much as you want. And I like Marco was saying, I don't disagree with you in principle, but I couldn't put my finger on what felt gross about it. And I think it's what Marco said, is that just feels too complicated. Like, either you're paying me or you're not. There's no in the middle. There's no free trial. It's either you're paying me or you're not. You really want to use this app?
Free trials are insanely popular for a reason, though.
That's true. And you can't overlook that.
I mean, they're everywhere. They're everywhere. I think they do really work. And I know it does complicate things. It does, especially for an app. Your app is different in that it's not like, it is very situational. You're probably not going to use this app while you're, commuting on the subway, right? It's when you're on the couch, it's when you're watching the show, or when you're discussing a show. Like, it's not a general purpose app, so you don't have that many opportunities for engagement. And when you do have the engagement, the value of your app is it's there when people need it. And if it's like, oh, they go to look it up and your app, gives them the Heisman, they're not going to come back. It needs to, like I said, it needs to prove value. It needs to say, I wanted an answer, I got an answer, and the app was pleasant to use. And this is a thing I find myself doing frequently, so we'll see. Now, here's the other thing that I'm sure people listening are probably thinking, and we've discussed as well. The audience for your app, at least initially, is not the same as the general public. It's going to be people to listen to your podcast and know about the app. No one knows about this app except for people who read your blog and listen to your podcast or are related to them, because it's not out yet. But that is a ready-made customer base, and that customer base has totally different values, has a totally different idea of the exchange going on here. They might be buying it because they're a fan of yours, because they've heard us talk about it so much. The general public is coming from a totally different perspective. So, I feel like, and I think it's reasonable to, like, this app has nothing to do with ATP. It is a general purpose app that anybody who watches television and movies can use. The question is, do you want to design this app to be optimal for the people who listen to ATP, or to be optimal for the people who have no idea what ATP is or who you are? And those are two very different designs, unfortunately.
What makes you say that? Like, what's the difference?
Because the people who are listening to ATP, they have different desires out of the app. Their impetus to buy, their motivation to buy is so incredibly different from people who have no idea who you are. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, they're totally different, but they're limited. They're small in number. And so, like, you could just say, I'm just going to set them aside and I'm going to build this app for the general public. Because, practically speaking, the people who just want to buy the app because they're curious about the app that Casey made, or because they want to have more context for the next episode of ATP they listen to, that's not a market that's going to sustain the development of this app. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everyone else is. And the everyone else, the design for them often involves the gross stuff that you find unappealing and complicated. And I base that on all of the apps that I download on the App Store that have those types of models, that they're, complicated, unappealing, and gross feeling.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I see a free trial as this make or break thing that you seem to, because, and maybe it's because I'm too myopic in the way I operate, but like, I think a free trial is useful if it's the sort of thing where that's the only way I can try the app. But this kind of homegrown alternate approach, I think, gives me kind of what a free trial does. Like, I view them as equivalent, even though they're not literally equivalent. I view them as equivalent, spiritually equivalent, where I either need a free trial to prove its worth, or I need to, distribute little sips of the app to prove its worth. And it seems redundant to have both to me, but I don't know, maybe I've got this all wrong.
I mean, if you give them the SIP, like, I think the main thing when you give them the SIP is to make sure it's clear to them this is not the end, that you should not delete this app, because even though I'm not letting you do this search now, at some point in the future that I'm going to tell you about tomorrow, next week, in an hour, whatever, you will be able to use the app again. And by the way, if you don't want to see this nag screen, here's the subscription or whatever, because that's what you're trying to stop is, I've hit a paywall, delete this app. That is, because you never get that person back. They're not going to re-download it or whatever. They have no, and so that's what you're trying to avoid. And free trial, the idea of the free trial is they get to try it with full functionality and hopefully fall in love with it. And then when that door closes eventually, they say, oh, I really did like this app, or I did find myself using it a lot.
I mean, I hear you, but I feel like that's the whole point of this. I'm going to say 5 searches a day. Maybe that number's wrong, but I feel like that's the whole point. And so I don't know. It feels currently like it's, like I said, like it's redundant, and I don't love it. And for what it's worth, when you tap on like a search, I'm going to send you to, I'm just going to put this in Slack. I don't think we're going to put an image in the show notes. But when you tap on the like search area, what you're seeing that I'm putting in Slack right now, that's not in the context of search. It's just, the one view in and of itself. But this would be in where the search results and stuff would be, is like a kind of mini paywall that says, hey, you got to keep going or wait, another few hours in order to get, whatever more searches. And that would show. And then what I haven't mentioned to you guys is the way I currently have it is, if you think about the area on the or if you think about the main screen and how there's a little magnifying glass that slides in from off screen on the right as you're drilling into things. When you're in free mode, to the left of that magnifying glass, I'm trying to generate an image real quick, so give me a second. I'm stalling for time. But to the left of that magnifying glass, there's a really obnoxious red banner at the bottom that says, you have one search left today. I think Marco made a good point earlier. It should say one free search left today.
Yeah.
But anyways, it's written right now. You have one search left today. Subscribe now to, remove limits or whatever. I can wordsmith that however I want. But what I'm driving at is there's this big ass banner right at the bottom saying, hey, this is your situation. You've got, however many searches left. And then you're going to have to subscribe in order to, get more.
Yeah, I think you could, this all makes sense. And I think that you are conveying all the information you need. You could actually do a fun kind of, I don't know if this is an underscore-esque thing, but it makes me think of him. Kind of like where, you have, you have one free search remaining, and then you use it, and then someone goes to try to do another search, and you're going to show up the paywall. On the paywall screen, have a button that says, can I just have one more search? And you press it, and then your app says, okay, and it lets you do it.
I don't know. Again, this is a lot of complexity.
Just the one-time extra.
Again, I come down with Marco. I don't want it this complicated.
That's not complicated. That's fun. That's surprise and delight. What I'm basically saying is the thing that I do, don't tell anybody, but the thing I do with the ATP sales that we have when we sell merchandise, I always tell the listeners that the end date is one day before it actually is.
Well, because that helps resolve things like what time zone does it end in? Like that's the real reason.
Exactly. I avoid all those issues. The reason people don't say, "Oh, I thought the sale was supposed to end today, but it's not." I don't have to deal with time zones. The end date is always one day later. Having the limit be one, having one extra in reserve that you give people one time. It's not like you can always ask for one more forever and ever, but just having the one time extra. That's another enticement to eventually buy because, this app was nice to me. I was thinking about buying, but can I just do this one last search? Oh, yeah, you can. And then the paywall is really down and no, you don't get to ask for one more forever and ever like a 2-year-old, right? That's the type of thing that you can do to soften this to make it less likely they delete the app immediately.
All right, I've been thinking about it. I played with the app. I saw your paywall screen in Slack. I think this is where I'm landing. You get 5 or 10 free searches, single time use, and then one per day after that.
Well, that's interesting.
Then when they hit that one, you show your screen. I will workshop the hell out of the screen for you. Don't ship it the way it is.
I know. As soon as I said
unlimited
Marco,
searches every day. What is the everyday phrase there for?
Anyway, yeah, we'll workshop the screen, but
this is by no means the final screen. This is very
You get 5 or 10 searches up front for free.
Yep.
Then one a day. Free searches. Then you hit the screen, subscribe to continue after that one a day. And I like how you said, or wait X hours to get, your next free search. Like that's great. And then you have your 2 options. You're kind of killing me even offering 2 options monthly and yearly.
Well,
okay.
I'm not sure that's
there.
right. We can talk about that. Yeah.
But yeah, you offer your subscription option, (S), and that's it. And there's no free trial. You get your 1 per day after you've used your 5, single-use ones. That's it. Your 1 per day. That's it. You hit this, and you go forward if you want. That, I think, that gives people enough time to get to know the app with their 5 or 10, stock free ones that aren't timed, and then it gives them that little out to keep them in the door on the way if they want to keep going after that. I think any more than 1 per day, and you will have the limit that what John was saying earlier with how many incidents per couch event are we going to even be using this app every day? Mm-hmm. So I think that's probably your best balance.
I think that if you went with that model, I think the initial bucket should be more generous. Because that's
10.
the falling.
I think
that's
10
the falling
is fine.
up. I think a little bit more than 10 would be because you really you want to give people more time to fall in love with the app. And some people hit it after 10. Some people it will take them 3 months to go through 10. Some people will go through 10 in one couch incident. So, and it's because it is finite and one time. It's not like you have to worry about it recurring. No one's going to live forever off of your free bucket of 20 instead of 10. It's just giving people more time to use the app enough that they are convinced that it's the type of thing they want to pay for. Or at least not delete.
So for the sake of discussion, I'm not sure this is the right answer, but you get 20 searches for free. Then once that bucket is up, be that in an hour or in a year, After that, you get one freebie a day. And if you use that one freebie, tough nuts, either wait another day or pay me.
Yeah.
I kind of like that.
And I still think you should have a free trial, but whatever.
I think I'm Team Marco on that one. I disagree.
John also thinks we need to offer our T-shirts in 17 different options every time, and I'm the one pushing for like, can we just do like 2 or 3?
And people love it. People love it. And it even works with Cotton Bureau's new model now, so we're not even penalized for doing it.
All right. Well, I'll think about the free trial. Although my current thinking is Marco's right. All right. So I actually I didn't think about this well, it's not really hybrid, but I'm going to call it the hybrid approach. I actually think this makes a lot of sense, and I think it's reasonably easy to digest. That's the thing I'm worried about, and that's what I keep coming back to with the free trial. Is I think it's adding a layer of complexity that just isn't helpful, and so I like this because it seems pretty straightforward. You got your bucket. Once you use it, you get one a day. After that, tough nuts. All right, so
I think it's just as complicated as all the schemes you were describing as complicated. But again, I say that the people who are using this app do not need a mental model of this system. They just need to know how do they feel about what the app is putting in front of their face and doesn't make them want to pay money. Like that's the level people are operating at when they're poking at their phone. They are not trying to suss out your monetization model and how you've structured things. So I don't think that's a concern at all. But if that was a concern, the thing you just described is just as complicated as everything else we've described.
I mean, maybe.
Well, and also like some people will suss it out. Some people will complain. Some people will be bounced off and they won't go through with it because they'll think it's too ridiculous.
Those are only going to be the listeners of our podcast, though. The regular people are just do not know who they would complain to. Assume Casey doesn't exist and is just a giant application mill somewhere. Like they think Apple made all the apps. Like that's not the people who complain are so much more like. I was going to say sophisticated, but so much more in tune with how the world actually works than the most of the people who are just poking at their phone screen. Yeah,
fair enough. But all this is to say, like, you're not going to please everyone no matter what you do. Don't sell yourself short. Like, don't rip yourself off trying to please everyone. Like, if you hear from people who are like, well, 20 free searches is really not enough for my needs. Like, it's fine. Like, then they should pay you.
If they say, that's what I'm saying. If they say, I used that up in one couch incident, A, they listen to the show because they said couch incident. And B, it's like, okay, but like, fine. You are outside the bell curve. 20 for one couch incident is way higher than, so I'm sorry, but I'm not, you can't configure the app for the outliers. That's what you're just trying to find them.
No, and if anybody uses it that heavily, they should be paying for it. That is exactly like, that is the kind of user that like, okay, then that makes sense. You have heavier needs for this. You should be paying for it. Simple as that. Because this is not a free app. This is an app that has limited free functionality that is really a subscription priced app. And there's nothing wrong with that. And there will be people who will try to make you feel bad about that, but don't, because that's life. This is what modern software is. You have to keep it up. Modern software is ongoing revenue in some form because because people expect ongoing updates.
I'll just use IMDb 1 star.
It's like, all right, good luck with that.
I know.
All right, so tell me if I'm bananas to say that monthly should be an option.
I like it. I think it's good. I think it's a lower number on the screen. I think Marco was saying should yearly be an option.
No. I mean, I think if there's only going to be one, it should be yearly. But I think I'm okay with 2. But what I think what you want. So I mean, look, cynically speaking, not everyone who signs up for a year will use it for a year. So you kind of want to push more people towards the yearly if you want to maximize money. So there's that to consider. I would suggest if you're going to offer both monthly and yearly, which I think I'm okay with, price them in such a way that people who do math will go for the yearly.
Yeah, and that argues for not making it $150 because that makes the math harder for people.
Right. Like so if you made it, $1 a month, $8 a year, that's pretty good. Like in terms of that will drive people.
People can do that math in their head real fast.
That's fair. That's fair.
Or make it $2 a month and make it $10 a year. Something like that. Whatever it is, like make it so that people can clearly tell, oh, I should really go for the year. And because that's really what you want.
If I care about that, but I think the smaller number for monthly is a smoother on-ramp for people who say, I don't know if I want this $8 worth.
Correct.
But then after 3 months of paying monthly, they'll be like, oh, this is dumb. I should just pay for annual.
Maybe, yeah. But ultimately, like you want this screen, you want most people who choose to subscribe to go for the longer term one for lots of reasons. Number one, you'll make more money from people who abandon it early. Number two, those people will be reminded only once a year instead of 12 times a year that they are subscribing to your app. And every time someone's reminded that they're subscribing to your app by one of those emails from Apple saying these are about to renew, that's a chance for them to cancel it. So you don't want to have to bother people with that every single month if they're willing to pay for a year at whatever price that is. So ideally, you want yearly customers more than monthly customers. So that, because you'll both make more from them, in terms of the abandonment, and then the ones that don't abandon it, you'll keep them longer probably. So a yearly is probably better for you. So yeah, I would price it. I think if your yearly price is going to be $8, I think $1 a month is a good price for the monthly. If I would maybe push yearly to be $10, but it's not that big of a difference. I know that you're going to have trouble asking for $10 because it's you, and you keep talking yourself down and giving yourself pay cuts.
Well, it's just I honestly, if it were, well, it is up to me, but if it were up to me and I felt like I could get away with whatever I wanted, then I think $10 a year is reasonable, and like $10 a year and like $1 or maybe $2 a month. But yeah. I think that a regular person would look at this and be like, no, that's way too much money. And that's what gives me pause.
Those people are going to say that no matter what these prices are. It could be 10 cents a month. They would say that.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I feel like keeping it under 10 it feels like I can just, it can be an impulse buy at under $10, even on a yearly basis, which is bananas, because if you go out to eat and get a soda, it's like $2.50, and that literally is pissed away in the span of 6 hours. But I mean, I do this on the consumer side. I do the same thing, and I'll look at a $10+ an app or $1 a year an app, and I'll be like, do I really need this? So I feel like the most I can get away with per year is $9. And
when I see those $10 apps, you know what I do? I usually go for the free trial and see if I like it.
Oh, Jesus. Of course.
No, okay. So look, if you're going to go with $8 or $9, then yeah, I'd say I would say in order to maximize the best ratio of monthly to yearly, I'd say $1 a month, $8 a year.
And you don't think that $1.50 is, because I mean the only reason to do more than $1 and less than $2 is just to eke out a little bit more from the monthly people, which maybe that's dumb anyway, because I'd be, strictly speaking, if they stay for a year, which is a big if, then I'm making more with $1 a month than I am $8 a year. But I don't know, it doesn't make sense to make it $1.50 or $2 or something.
I mean, you could try. Look, and this is the kind, you can play with this over time. You can actually
you can change prices all the time. Like people don't need to have a comprehensive history of the pricing of your app in their head.
Well, I thought for subscriptions though, it got a little dodgy, because then you have to like get the permission or something like that. You know better than me, Mark.
I don't know if you can change. You can actually increase the subscription of existing ones, but I'm just thinking of like for going forward for new customers, for setting aside what existing customers deal with.
You could just like retire one and start another subscription and
and
just keep it going, but not have it be purchasable in the app. So like there's ways to do it. Like you just have multiple subscriptions at different price points. Like you can change. Like recently, the Disney Plus mechanic they added. You can increase the price of an existing subscription and bring those users along, but I believe you have to give them some amount of, like, the system gives them some kind of notice, and I think I don't think they have to opt in, but they have a chance to opt out. So that kind of runs a risk of loss there. So ideally you don't need to change these prices, but you can change these prices.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, look, $1.50 a month is not bad. I just think $1 a month is an easier. It's a more obvious sell. It lets the screen look nicer. Like you have more design options in terms of your biggest markets, like the U.S., where it's going to be a nice even number. You can not even show the decimal points. So you have options there. Actually, no, you can't, because it's gonna say. Do the new tiers have even like $1 exactly, or is it still 99 cents?
I thought so. I thought they do. That's why I have.
I got to double check that. I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's why I have it currently as literally 8.00 and either 1.50 or 1.00. It's because I was thinking about it, and I was listening to Thoroughly Considered earlier today, and they were talking a lot about the 99 cent thing, and I feel like having the round number, I feel like that just feels nicer.
Yeah.
And that's partly why I don't want to go all the way to 10. I could be convinced to go 9, but I don't think I want to go all the way to 10, because that just even $9.99. I mean, that's effectively the same damn thing. So,
9 feels like 10. Like I think that's why I keep going back to 8 as instead of like if you're going to be below 10, 8's a really good number. I think
and that's
people
kind of
perceive that well.
That's kind of where I am too. So, all right. So I think we all then, I'm asking, not telling, we all agree that about $8 a year sounds about right. And you, Marco, you were pretty perturbed about the monthly idea, but have you come around on that? Or are we still not loving it?
I think I mean, look, obviously I don't have a lot of data here. I have my app that is yearly only, but that's a little bit different in the sense that my subscription is not gating access to core features of the app. So it's a very different mechanic. You know, in your case, this is like you need to convert as many people as possible because anybody you don't convert with this paywall, as John said, is likely to abandon usage of the app completely. And then you make nothing from them. You know, in my case, if they don't like my premium subscription, they can just keep using the app for free, and I make money from the ads from them. So it's a very, very different scenario. In your scenario, I think it does probably make sense to have monthly and yearly, especially because the monthly is a cheaper way in the door. I don't think you need free trials, but I could be wrong. I haven't used them in the App Store, so like as a developer, so I'm not sure how the conversion rate would be different. It does introduce a level of conceptual complexity for the customer. It introduces complexity to the screen. That being said, I don't think it introduces meaningful complexity to your implementation. That's a flag you set on the in-app purchase, and then whatever validation you're doing server side or whatever, like it makes that a little more complicated to account for. But for your purposes, it almost doesn't matter if somebody's in a trial or not. Like you're just trying to make money from them long term. You don't really care if this search came from a trial user versus this one came from a paying user.
Yeah, it's not. I already have support for it in my kind of facade in front of StoreKit too. It's generally fairly straightforward unless you're trying to figure out how much time is left in the trial and or how when the trial expired. Then it becomes a little bit interesting. But I think I could support the trial if I wanted to. I just don't think I want to, and because again, I just feel like it's more complicated. But
yeah, it is.
But John, where do you come down on both monthly and yearly?
I think you should definitely have both.
The other thing that's interesting about monthly, which I thought I've been thinking about if I should message this in app at all, but certainly I'll talk about it on the show, is that if you're a Casey List superfan, you could do monthly, and if you stick with it, then you're giving me an extra, $4 a year. And now I don't think that that's necessarily going to be what anyone would choose to do, except like 5 of you whom I love dearly. But it is another way to kind of have an implicit tip jar without actually putting in a tip jar, which I kind of like.
Yeah, I mean, there will be some amount of that for sure. I don't know if it'll be enough to make that have to dictate any choices you make about the pricing of the monthly.
Yeah, that's fair. Mm-hmm.
That's probably not a massive factor in determining the price.
Yep. All right, so it sounds like the Brain Trust has concluded a batch of non-renewable tokens up front, or no, I shouldn't say tokens, of searches up front, somewhere in the order of 20-ish, I think.
I'd still go 10, frankly, but go ahead. I don't.
I'd still go with free trial. I mean, there's no consensus here. This is not decision making by committee.
No, there's some consensus.
I have opinions. Marco has opinions, but Casey, you get to decide. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah. No, I hear you.
If you're trying to get me and Marco to come to a consensus, it's not going to happen.
No, not necessarily. I'm just trying to for as much my own benefit as the listeners. I'm trying to get kind of the brass tacks. Where did we all individually land? And if there is something that vaguely smells like a consensus, what does that look like? And it sounds to me like, again, something to the order of 10 to 20 free searches, and then one a day after that. I think it sounds like we all agree that monthly and yearly is not such a terrible idea. A little bit of disagreement as to whether it should be $1, $1.50, or $2. Do you think I could go all the way to 2 on monthly?
You could try it. I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, having something begin with a $1 a month sounds like nothing to a lot of people. Like that is a really good sounding and looking thing. $1.50 is a little more complicated. As John said, it makes the math a little bit less likely to end up with the yearly purchase, but ultimately that still looks really cheap. $2 is really cheap, but doesn't look as cheap as $1.50. So, I think there is a lot of benefit, like psychologically and visually, in getting that one point something a month. That is, I think, very attractive.
And then yearly, $8, maybe $9. I don't know. I feel like the delta between 12 monthly installments and one $8 installment, I feel like that's quite a lot of savings for the yearly subscription.
Right.
More than I think I want to
That's what
give.
you want. You want people to be going to the yearly.
Yeah, I know. But I feel like what I want to do is make it like $9 a year. But I still think that I agree with what you were saying earlier. I feel like there's some weird divide between 8 and 9 that you would expect to see between 9 and 10. But I feel like 8 feels cheap in a happy way, whereas 9 does not feel cheap in a happy way. It feels like it doesn't feel cheap at all, really. It feels like it's getting expensive.
And the thing, what you have to consider here is, it's easy to look at these numbers and be like, well, geez, I'm setting this up so early, and if I make this 9 instead of 8, I'm going to make X% more money.
Yeah.
But if the conversion rate is affected even a little bit by these pricing differences, you can quickly erase that margin. So if you convert a decent number more people at 8 than you would at 9, you will make more money total at 8.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take that many more people to make up that kind of difference. And the same thing is true of the monthly level. Whatever it is, like if you're setting it at $1.50 a month versus $2 a month, I think you'll get way more people in at $1.50 than you would at $2, and therefore I think you'd make up that difference in volume. But this is the kind of stuff that it's one thing to have these kind of gut feelings. This is how we think it is. It's really hard to know in advance, and it's even harder to be able to make this kind of decision without just testing it and then being willing to change the pricing in the cumbersome ways that we have to do that.
Yeah. One final thing we didn't talk about much, but I'm curious both of your opinions. Maybe we'll start with John. Do I do some sort of one-time only, like standard style in-app purchase? I'm going to call it a lifetime unlock during this conversation, but I would not refer to it that way. I would refer to it as like a one-time purchase or something. Do I do a lifetime unlock?
No.
Hey, I agree. I that's where I've landed too, but tell me why.
I mean, because you can always roll it out later. Mm-hmm. And you can roll it out to people who have already paid you a bunch of money, but just don't want to deal with it anymore, but really love the app and are willing to pay a lot and have had time to fall in love with it. But I don't see how anyone is going to see this app, use it enough without doing one of the subscriptions to decide they want to pay a price that's going to be worth your while for a one-time unlock. Keep it in your back pocket. Save it for 3 years from now from this app when this app is wildly successful, but all the power users are so pissed about paying subscriptions that you can charge them $100. Then we can talk about it again. But now, absolutely not.
So for many reasons, even if you didn't call it lifetime unlock, that's how people will perceive it. They will perceive this as, I buy this and now I, quote, own it. And they're going to, A, expect that it will work forever, which B, involves you updating it over time, because when we build modern software, we're building it on quicksand. There is no such thing as software that stays working forever without updates anymore, especially iOS software accessing a web service. Like there's so many moving factors here. So you're building on quicksand. This is going to require constant updates. Not like every day, but at least every couple of years. Like suppose you worked on this, decided this app's kind of done, and abandoned it. And you wanted people to still be able to use it. You would have to put in a certain amount of time every couple of years just to keep it working on the latest versions of iOS and the latest devices. So, there's going to be some degree of maintenance over time. So you need ongoing revenue from people. It's simple as that. You need some way to make money from ongoing use of your app to fund ongoing updates of your app, which is what everybody expects you to have. So, you need ongoing revenue. Simple as that. If you don't have ads, then it's subscriptions. That's it. Those are two options that we know about. Or creepy user data, which you don't want to do, and I don't blame you. So that's it. You have to make ongoing revenue from your app somehow to justify continuing to update it. So and lifetime, any kind of lifetime or flat rate or however you would brand it, it gives users the impression and the expectation that and the entitlement that they will feel that they deserve access to this app for an indefinite period into the future because they paid to unlock it. They paid to own it. But that's not the reality of the modern software environment. They can't own it. They can't have it forever without ongoing work from you. So it's better to not even try to sell that to people. Don't even sell them on the idea of that anymore because that doesn't exist for an iOS app.
Yeah. All right. Brain trust has spoken. I appreciate it, fellas.